Yeah, so I don't know. Me and Phil were
There we
talking
go.
about it Monday, and I
Hey,
really
Google, turn on the snake room lights.
the future is now.
Hey,
Whoa.
Now we're good, indefinitely.
Skynet is
man,
going live.
I need to get on that, boy. Damn, that was
It's
cool.
nice, man. Yeah, I just have my light cycle set for the room like that, so
That's
no
fantastic.
flipping light
2020,
switches.
the clapper
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
new millennium.
I've got one of those cheap timers sitting on a power strip behind my cage over there that does my UVB. So
Okay. Yep.
I give him UVB exposure for like 3-4 hours a day, and so it just pops on and off. My girlfriend was
Sure.
in here earlier while I was cleaning, and the light chucked off, and she was like, "Was that supposed to happen?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's on a timer. It's fine." But that's fancy. That's fancy. We need to get on that level.
One day.
But
Just a
yeah,
couple
I
of
don't
cheap
know.
smart bulbs that plug right into the main fixture.
I don't know. Do you ever worry that too much automation is like? I guess it's one thing if it's a convenience thing, but when it gets to the point where we like rely on it, and then machines take over, then we're kind of
Sure.
in
No,
trouble.
that's definitely going to happen. I mean,
yeah,
but we're
Elon Musk
just
called it.
blissfully living our lives as best as possible until then, you know.
it's slowly
There's
happening,
nothing we can do to
man.
stop it.
Yeah, no, it's slowly happening. Machines are the future. You know, Parkers, you can barely find a Parkers people running actual registers there now. So, but,
No, that's a gas station down here.
yeah.
People that may not know. But this is episode 173 of THP. We are back. It's been like 2 weeks between Jake being sick and my internet being nothing but problematic, which we actually don't think it was the internet. We think it was StreamYard because Phil was having issues too. Seems to be fixed now so far.
Yeah, because we recorded 2 weeks ago. We did that live stream, and some people popped in, but we didn't get to post it. So
I didn't even upload the audio because none of the audio was working. So that is like technically 172. I just carried it on with 173 here. So whatever. It can be a lost episode, but
yeah. So the people who caught the live stream, congrats! You are the only ones that got to hear that.
For those of you that actually sat through it, yeah,
dude, there was people waiting after like 10 minutes of us figuring out the internet. There were still people waiting on us to come back. I was like, oh,
God bless you. This episode is brought to you by BlackBoxCages.com. Check them out. Facebook, Instagram. I started putting together my XT4 for the Ackies today. I got it built. I got it sealed with the silicone. Katie helped me film, so there's going to be a video and assembly. This was sent to me by Jen for an assembly video to show people sort of how to do it. This is the first cage I've actually had to build since I got a 2-foot cube from PVCcages.com when he was still doing cages years ago, and this 4 was freakishly easy to put together. Like, I am not mechanically inclined when it comes to a lot of these things.
You are not.
Like,
neither am I.
This thing went together like nothing. Like, it was so easy.
Butter.
Yeah.
Straight butter. Just like the racks, boy.
Like, all the screws, none of them went in weird or at any funny angles. Everything went in like no problem. Like, it was just the whole thing. I was honestly very surprised because a lot of times when I have to put together cages, I'm like, I'm going to mess something up, or I'm going to do something wrong, or I'm going to miss something, or there's going to be a hole or like a pilot hole that's off or something or another where I'm just going to have to like wing something to fix it. Not the case.
Yeah.
At all. And I'm saying that as unbiased as possible. Like, this was ridiculously easy to put together. Everything came in, shipped perfectly, no issues with doors or anything like that.
And so that, like, and again, this isn't me talking bad about another company by any means. But prior to BlackBox, I was going through Reptile Basics for my cages and racks, and the racks came assembled. My 4-foot cages came in a flat pack where I had to put them together, and literally both times I ordered cages, like, it was, granted, they're sitting over there stacked now with my carpets in them and they're fine, but there's something wrong with both of them. Like, they don't stack properly. The screws went through one of like the holding, like the separating parts to stack the cages. One of the screws kind of went through that, so they don't stack right. One of them came like the
always
screw
just
kind
small
of came
stuff.
out. Yeah,
It's
it came out
always
the
small
side a
stuff.
little bit, and with both of them, the doors don't fit right. Like they go in, but I can't lock any one at once. I have to lock the two sides and then the middle, because the middle won't go without the two sides going. So like it's just like, yes, they work, but it's not smooth. And again, that's not me talking bad about Reptile Basics. The cages are fine. But like that
They
little
ain't black
stuff,
box cages.
no, they ain't black box like that, period. They're not black box equipment, and that coming from Smitty with that, like that goes a long way, because like if you get them, from other companies, if you get them assembled, then that's, they're a little better off. But if you have to build them yourself, they're usually, from my experience, it's been both times something has been wrong to make them not perfect, and
Well,
we
the
like our stuff
doors,
perfect. So if you
the
want
doors on
perfect, you
this
go through back box.
come assembled. Comes with the little knobs already on it. Comes with the hinges already on it. All the clasps to lock the doors, like those are all on there. So you don't have to do nothing but put it all together. You'll see it in the video. So I'm going to post that at some point. I put it together. It's curing right now. So all the silicone and stuff is drying.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'm going to put the lights in. I'm going to do a video on that. So it's going to be like a 3-part thing. So the assembly, the lights, and then putting in all the stuff in the Ackies themselves. So it'll be, I don't think I'll release them all at the same time. I'll definitely do like the assembly and the lighting one. I'll release those. And then sort of once I finish getting it together and get the Ackies in it, because I have to wait for the light bulbs to come in for the lamps, the heat bulbs. Then, or I may not. I don't know. I have the UV, so I could still plug it in and just put in like a regular LED bulb for the time being, just to show people the whole thing. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I have everything I need in terms of substrate and things like that to make a mixture, and it'll be good.
Nice.
I'm excited. So it'll look nice. I'll finally be able to sort of move some stuff around. Yeah. And you can have that AP cage back. That's been basically a really nice stand for every other for all the black box cages that are on top.
That's pretty much what it's going to be for me. I'm going to put it under the other 4-footers I have and stick something in there.
Storage. Like I've literally just kept it open, and that's where I've just been storing like empty stuff.
Yeah. No, that's an old cage too, man. I got that. I got that from a buddy who had it for several years, and he gave it to me.
It did its job.
But it ain't black box. Let's face
black
it.
Box.
No, none of these are black box, man. Every time I open one of my cages or deal with one of my other racks, I'm like, damn, I wish this was a black box made, man, because everything else I own, like something just doesn't fit right. It's either too tight. I spill water, like it's just kind of wobbly, like. But my black box stuff, dude, I mean, it's bar none, man. You can't beat it.
The only thing I am concerned about with the Ackies in this is them scratching up the windows.
Well, I mean, there's nothing you can do about that.
There's nothing I can do about it.
Did you get glass or like the plastic for that?
No, it's plexi. It's acrylic.
Plexi, yeah. No, I didn't know if they offer glass and acrylic or not.
Do they sell replacement doors? You can.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure I can.
If it really gets bad over time.
Yeah, they would definitely send you one if needed.
Because I know there's like the polish stuff you can do, but I've heard it takes forever because there's like 3 different things you got to put on it just to make it normal again, and I don't know. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm super pumped. Definitely planning a trip up there again here soon. My buddy Justin Olson just moved down to our area from Minnesota, and he came over last weekend and saw the BioGs and the Rhino rats, and so now he wants both. Because I mean they're Rhino rats in BioGs, which we're gonna get into Rhino rats here in a few. So check out Black Box Cages. Check out their website, blackboxcages.com, Facebook and Instagram, all that good stuff, and then go get yourself some hot sauce, some Steve Snakesuary and his Venom hot sauce. Help him out. You buy his hot sauce, you're helping him with all of his public outreach, relocations, rehabilitations. He uses it to help take care of his own collection that he uses for that public outreach and the education. So hit him up, stevesnakesuary.com. And
that's one of the cool things about Steve, man, is like he doesn't, as far as I know, he doesn't breed anything. He just kind of has a ton of snakes. Like he has a bunch of stuff, but he doesn't breed anything. He keeps because he loves keeping. He works with these animals because he loves working with these animals, and that's, and at least in my opinion, that's something kind of still unique to find with somebody that keeps in a mass quantity, at least. Normally people have a lot of snakes, they're breeding, but Steve, I mean, as far as I know, he doesn't really do
I'm
any
sure
of
with
that.
his
It's
work
all
schedule,
public outreach. Yeah, he kind of can't.
Doing his job where he's, first responder and stuff, his schedule probably doesn't jive too well with all that and babies and stuff. So
yeah.
But he's a good dude.
Yeah, he's awesome.
His hot sauce is really good.
Yeah, it is fantastic. Cottonmouth sauce, where it's at, boy.
Cottonmouth sauce is exactly where it's at.
Gotta try it.
So this week I'm very excited because we get to talk rhino rats and Russian rats.
Nothing better. Yep.
And colubrids
colubrids
in general. I mean, come on.
We are joined this episode by Mr. PJ Kohn of Handmade Herps. So it's funny, when I posted that you were going to be on the show tonight, I had a handful of people, Doc Wyman being one of them.
Oh yeah.
And they were like, had nothing but great things to say about you. They were like, he's an absolute class act. And Sean Porter, I think too, was like East Michigan's finest.
Yeah.
Are you in East Michigan?
Yeah. I'm in Southwest Michigan, more east of him though.
Maybe that's.
I mean, he's as West Michigan as you can get, so everything's East Michigan.
Okay.
Him. Yeah.
Well, I'm from Wisconsin, so
okay. Yeah.
I respect Michigan. Yeah, I respect Michigan. Yeah, at least you're not in Detroit.
I feel like Michigan and Wisconsin are pretty mutually.
Yeah, we're pals
there. It's not like it's Ohio or Indiana or something.
Yeah. Or Illinois.
Could be worse. It could be Ohio.
Yeah. As long as you're not Ohio or Illinois, we're good. But Wisconsin and Michigan, we're buddies.
Yeah.
Cool. But
you're surrounded on all sides, like Israel.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. No, I'm still mad we haven't taken over that little section that y'all own across the lake, but it's all right.
The UP. Yeah.
Yeah, you can have it. It's all right. We don't need it.
Yeah. We'll make good use of
it. For sure.
Yeah. So we're glad you're here, man.
But, yeah.
Glad to be here.
I guess we'll start sort of with the usual. I hate the usual intro stuff as far as like how you got into reptiles and all that. So I wrote sort of in the outline, it can be a brief or not so brief, sort of your history with herpetoculture and why, like what you're focused on currently and why those things.
Sure.
Better yet, how you started versus how you've developed.
Yep. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of differences there. Yeah. So despite you hating this question, hopefully you won't hate my answer. So we'll get
I definitely won't. It's just I never hate the answer. It's just like you listen to every other podcast now, and it's like, how'd you get into reptiles? And it's always
but it's also my favorite question, man.
Yeah, I think a lot of people love listening to those parts.
Yeah, I love hearing the beginnings of everybody because even though it's like we all might have a very similar base, everybody has their own kind of thing that makes it unique to them. So it's one of my favorite questions personally. So
sure. Yeah, so I feel like some of my roots will be similar to a lot of people, some pretty different. So I was probably a late bloomer as far as herpetoculture goes, but definitely early on really interested in animals in general. Like as a little kid in the summers, instead of going to like sports camps or things like that, I actually went to our school that had like the day program for kids, and growing up was just really into all animals in general. I was like the kid that impressed everyone with all the animal facts that they knew that I thought was probably way cooler than anyone else thought. And I didn't really have any reptiles growing up. We had other pets, but my parents just weren't super into the idea of having reptiles in the house. And I would say that void really filled in my younger years by being really into Pokemon.
There you go.
Pokemon games and stuff. Like I feel like that was it planted a lot of the seeds for kind of the future obsessions that grew into reptiles in a much more real and tangible thing.
I could totally see that, man. That's actually the first I've heard that. Everybody's like,
I feel like everyone talks about like, I love dinosaurs. Exactly, dinosaurs is always the example, and dinosaurs are cool, but it was Pokemon for me. So.
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah.
So my first herp didn't actually come in until I was 18 years old. I got a leopard gecko from the local pet store, and the fascination was there. the knowledge was not. So a couple years into having that, unfortunately, metabolic bone disease, and I didn't know
Oh,
what I
wow.
was doing with gut loading and dusting properly. So that was also a great motivator to actually do a lot of the learning. Um, so that was post high school that I got that animal. I went to Michigan State University. I got there, and while I was there, I got involved with the herpetology club. And snakes were something I always thought were pretty fascinating, but again, not having them growing up and like my family wasn't super into them. I heard a lot of the scary things about them growing up, and
Of course.
so not having experiences for myself, it was like, yeah, they're cool, but I wasn't necessarily going to go out and want to handle them all the time or have them for myself. But getting involved in that herpetology club, I met other reptile owners on campus and had snakes, and that just gave me the opportunity to learn about them more and interact with them more. And I eventually just kind of got the bug and started really deep diving into that interest. And this was very much in the era of earlier Snake Bites TV and a bunch of the early reptile YouTubers.
Mhm.
Um, I was pretty active on the Bush League Breeders Club boards at that time as well. Fortunate to only live like a 2.5 hour drive away from Tinley Park. So when NARBC was coming up in 2012, I went down there with a friend, and that was when I actually got my first snake ever, which was a rhinoceros rat snake. Um,
Yeah.
and I smuggled that into my dorm room along with like 4 other animals that I wasn't allowed to have any of them, but made it work. And actually wasn't a record of just 4 animals. I had a buddy that lived in another dorm, and he had a dozen that were just like hidden in drawers, and he had a rack system in his closet and everything. So it was yeah,
Nice.
kind of the thrill of the danger of that. Um, but yeah, that first rhino rat snake just started in a critter keeper unheated right on the desk in my dorm room. And she did great in there.
Say, I'm sure she loved it.
Yeah. And so I, throughout the next couple of years post college, I actually, my first job out of college was a zookeeper at Binder Park Zoo in Battle Creek, Michigan. And I'd say it was this kind of personal interest in herps and learning all about them that actually landed me that job, because I was just interning there initially, but the herp guy left while I was there for an internship, and they needed someone that had that knowledge, and they knew I was. They'd essentially been interviewing me for the several months of the internship, and so they
Mm-hmm.
offered me the spot, and I stuck around. I was there for 4.5 years.
Wow.
Um, and so then outside of zookeeping, I was growing my own collection at home. And so I had this one rhino rat snake. I ended up getting a male a little bit down the road. But of course, at that time, I was heavily on the BLBC, again, the Bush League Breeders Club. And so pretty much all the talk there, or the majority of it, was ball pythons and crested geckos and things like that. And reptile radio was the big podcast, and
Yeah.
again, mostly ball python talk. And so my collection actually started with mostly ball pythons and crested geckos. And I started to grow that for a little while. Definitely a lot of interest in them. And then after a couple years, some life stuff hit, and I just had to get rid of all animals for a little while, including that pair of rhinos. But luckily, those went to a good friend of mine, so I actually now have lineage from that original pair in my. Um, and it was maybe a year and a half without any animals, and I started to rebuild a collection over again. And this time, old world rat snakes was really the focus. And let's see, starting out again, it was out of Tinley. I got a trio of rhinos and a pair of cockeye bamboo rat snakes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I know at that time I definitely had an interest for. I wanted mandarin. There's man liked how like the green of the rhinos, the red of the bamboos, and the yellow of the mandarins. It was almost like this stoplight theme going on of
Yeah.
the red, yellow, and the green.
Yeah.
And yeah, it started with one small rack system, and eventually, you guys know how it goes. Just over the years, more and more animals catch your interest, more come in. You have opportunities to work with cool things, and um, that kind of led to the collection I have today, which is definitely mostly old world rats, black milk snakes as well. And then just recently started getting into some Western hognose over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Man, I know it's funny. I never the thought of a rhino rat as a first snake for some
Yeah.
reason. I hadn't really thought of that. Like, what a perfect species
Yeah.
for that, especially if they're, obviously if it's a neonate,
And
it's a little different. That
yep, and it was eating pinkies off the tongs, but yeah, again,
like it doesn't. I don't know
some of
that
the
it
stuff
gets
that
much
drew
better
me
than
to
that.
it was room temperature, super interesting. I was definitely the coolest kid in the herpetology club bringing that thing back. Because it was something that, at 2012
Yeah.
especially, a lot of people had seen them, but they'd seen them in pictures or online, but not actually
Right.
seen them in person. So
Yeah, and I mean it's one of those, like, I feel like rhinos are perfect for the guy that's done, like, as a first snake, perfect for the guy who's done a bit of research, because if you try too hard with rhinos, it sounds like they'll crash. You know what I mean? They're one of those, like, put it in a cage, leave it at room temperature, and don't put too much effort into it. I feel like if you put too much effort into a rhino, it's not going to do that well. But this is coming from a guy who doesn't keep rhinos. But
they don't need a lot to be content.
Right.
Like,
That's
it doesn't take much to keep them happy, and I love them, man.
Yeah,
I can't.
they're cool.
It's one species where I wish I could have an entire room of them.
Yeah,
and just love every single one of them.
Yep. And it's super exciting too. Like once you get into breeding them and producing your own, because like you have no idea what your holdbacks are going to turn into. And I guess that's the same for like chondro guys or a lot of animals that do develop more over time.
Bairds.
Yep.
Yep.
So it's a little bit of a luck of the draw and just getting to see them develop over.
So what is it in particular about old world colubrids that sort of drew you to them over other stuff?
Yep. Did you catch this question?
Ruh-roh Raggy.
BJ, can you hear us?
StreamYard's playing games.
Once again.
We were doing so well.
Hear us?
Sure. So I apologize in advance. Yeah, I can hear you now. My internet's been taking like a couple brief moments of lagging and then it catches up. So
StreamYard
talk amongst yourselves when that happens. But yeah, man, old world colubrids, the rat snake specifically, I think what initially the two things that really draw me to the group are the bright colors and just the natural wild type varieties. A lot of these see in a lot of other species this vibrantly, and also just the ease of care being that for most people, ambient room temp in their home is exactly what these animals are going to thrive in. It just was, that was a really appealing thing to me starting out, especially as a poor broke zookeeper, not wanting to break the bank with all kinds of needing heat panels or extra, all this stuff, extra stuff that goes into that setup.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, being up where you are too, I mean, it's perfect for cockeye and mandarins and that stuff that definitely needs it a little cooler. Like that's the only reason that I haven't, like, I would love to keep bamboo rats and stuff, but honestly, I can't keep them in my room. Like my room is just too warm.
How warm is your room most of the time?
I mean, it stays in the upper 70s.
Okay.
It's going to be a little cooler now that it's starting to kind of cool down some outside, but
it's hot. It's hot in there in the middle of the summer. Like
I have the cave geckos in our bedroom, and it Katie hates it because I'm like, I can't. I told her, she's like, "Are these quarantining in here?" I was like,
"No,
for now." But when they're not,
they'd be much more suited in cave gecko temperatures, and I mean they can spike up around 80, but you definitely don't want them to be there for a prolonged period of time. Lower 70s, mid 70s is better.
Yeah. So I've those and mandarins too. That'd be awesome, but it's just one of those things where I just don't think that they would gel with the room very well. So
yeah, and that kind of goes into the whole, like, keep things in your repertoire type of deal. Like that's why I keep a lot of I keep my room warmer because it's easier for me. So I keep a lot of southeastern stuff and carpet pythons, and that's pretty much what I stick to because
Sure.
it all kind of flows. I can, the Pituophis, I can turn off their hot spots. The rat snakes, they can get a slight hot spot when my room gets up to 79, 80 degrees, but they're all good. They get a little antsy when it gets warm, but that'll
Yeah.
be what it is. But it's not with me, like it would be a lot harder to keep that type of stuff, because they would be constantly moving and they'd be too hot, and it's just,
Mhm.
it wouldn't be good, here because I keep it warmer for everybody else.
Right.
But
Ambience
that's
usually hitting
again,
around
it's again,
70 to
right,
75 at highest. So
right.
it
It'll
does
be
line up.
interesting once I
My
move the
ambients do
Ackies.
not stay at 75.
Yeah. Once I move the Ackies into this black box cage, it's going to be interesting to see how that changes the sort of the dynamic of the room, because that's one of the things that keeps
It's
my
gonna
room
hold
so
heat a lot
warm.
better. Yeah, it's gonna hold heat a lot more.
So we'll see. I may have to kick some heat back on my racks and stuff.
I will say with that, Smitty, if you have stuff stacked on your black box, so with I've got my yellow rat and a Bio XA3, a 3x2x2, and I have a heat bulb on them, and I have it turned off for now because the heat that came from that heat bulb coming up was actually heating up the cage that I have stacked up on them, like giving them a hot spot during the day. So
See,
just watch it.
I'm gonna have the
Watch
Janssen
anything
Eye on
that's
top of
stacked.
that, but the Janssen Eye, their heat panel isn't even plugged in most of the time either because
Yeah,
they unplug it. So that may actually just work out better.
Yeah, it'll give them a perfect little warm spot. Like
that'll be good.
mine under a puppy pad was getting up to about like 86, 88. Like
Oh, that's
with
like perfect.
yeah, exactly. So it worked out nicely, but my heat for the carpet was on the other side and it was just gonna clash. So I need that 24/7. His heat I only had on for 5-6 hours a day, and then so I didn't want to fluctuate like that. So he's without heat for now. Luckily, my room stays warm enough. He's getting UVB, but it'll work out great for something like the Janssen Eye. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. Yep, we shall see.
Yeah.
So you got into mandarins at one point, and then the other day when we were talking, you had mentioned how you were kind of moving away from those. Is there a particular reason?
Yeah, I feel like I'm actually going to get in trouble if Matt hears this because I've had sold mandarins 2 different times, and they've always come from Matt as well. So yeah, I had some mandarins early on, and I actually lost the male that I had. I just came into the snake room one day. I used the Reptile Basics racks, and that tub was like 4 inches open. And there's no conceivable way that, usually I've heard of snakes that have pushed their way out of a tub, but it would be like just barely open. So no other reasonable explanation other than me accidentally leaving that open like during some cleaning and not realizing it.
Yeah.
And I searched forever and I never found that guy. So at one point I took a look at some of the stuff in my collection where I just had lone animals, and I had this awesome Vietnamese red mandarin female that was she was probably close to 3 years old at that point. And I just decided, I'm gonna focus on these other things, and I'll part. Some lucky guy in Jersey got a really nice mandarin female for a heck of a good deal. But then, of course, within weeks, I totally regretted that, and that's always posting his insane mandarins on Instagram and everything, and so it hooked me right back in. And so I got another pair of Vietnamese mandarins from him that were actually 66% past head xanthic as well. And
oh, nice.
I'm not personally actually interested in as much. Like, it's super cool, but I prefer the vibrancy, the yellows, and the high contrast with the black. But funny enough, I think that het influence of the axanthic gene actually improves the contrast of the black and the yellow in those guys. But yeah, just we'll talk more about kind of this shift of focus. But that happened again, and yep, those mandarins went and found a new home as well. So I am sorry, Matt. Please give me, and also don't sell me more mandarins if I come clawing back in a couple weeks, because I need to be decisive.
Just tell me no.
Well, Justin can definitely relate to you on a snake getting out and never being able to find it. So I remember that Rhino, man. You were heartbroken.
Dude.
That was bad. That was the
I've
worst
had
It
a
was-
couple
yet.
rhino escapes. I've always found them though, but man,
Dude,
it is a
they're stupid
stomach
good at getting
dropping
out.
day. Yeah.
Yeah, they are. They are. Justin
Like,
had that
they're smart.
one that got out and it was never found.
And that, like, I was really upset that it was gone, but then I was also really upset because Burwell sent it to me as a gift. Because I was talking about how much I loved rhinos. He's like, "Hey man, I got an extra mail if you want." And I was like, "Sure." And then I get it, and then a week later, I'm like, "Hey Terry."
It's gone.
Ooh, and it was quick too, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't even get enough time to really get to know it.
Rhinos
And,
are
But now
three
that rack
times.
is done and gone, and you're
It
on
is,
to
dude.
bigger and better black boxes.
I put that thing in the local
Yes.
reptile group. That and the other like 32 quart rack I have here. I was like 225 takes both. Crickets. And I even said in the ad, like, if you're getting this hatchling rack, put something bigger in it than hatchling colubrids, like baby ball pythons, anything other than tiny snakes. It's perfect.
Yeah.
And I've got nothing. So
Dang.
I use again the reptile basics racks, and I start my hatchling colubrids in like the really small ones. I forget what they call them, like the I8s or whatever, like pencil
Yeah, I
box
know what you're
size.
talking about. Yeah, I
And
know
they
exactly
can't
what you're talking
escape from that. That's fine. But I had 2 yearling female holdbacks that I moved into the VE6s. So it's got those 3 different sizes of tubs, and it was in the smallest one. And I mean, there's a little gap there. You can see it. I didn't think it was small enough, but
I
one
don't know
day
how
and
many times I have to learn that lesson where I'm like,
I
that
know,
gap ain't
yeah.
big enough. There's no way
Yep.
they're getting out of
Dude,
that.
I'm telling
But sure
you,
enough, the
even
rhino was gone. But
Yeah.
luckily, I looked around for like 30 minutes and just usually they're like on the heat tape behind a tub somewhere.
Yep.
If anything gets out, so I just started pulling tubs out, started looking there, and man, it was the biggest sigh of relief when I saw that thing.
Yeah.
Sitting back on some
That's
heat tape.
actually exactly where I found most of my escapees. Luckily, I haven't had an escapee in a while. The last two I
Way to
had,
brag.
yeah, the last two I had were water snakes, and my mom actually found them and woke me up in the middle of the night. Was like, "Hey, there's a snake in the house," and I'm like, "What?" And I woke
Nice.
up and I was like, "Oh, this is mine."
Yeah.
But
A buddy of mine
dude,
had
I'm
a rhino
telling
get
you,
out
yeah,
at his place once. So it was actually a cage he got from me. I made it out of these old Rubbermaid all access tubs. It's like a Rubbermaid, like a cage with a clear door that you can like hinge down. And I made some
Yeah.
modifications to it, some screening and a lock and everything, but it somehow still got out. And he was looking around his herp room, and he actually had some fish tanks in there as well. And he found it like in one of the fish tanks, fully submerged, fish swimming around it. And she was just, it was just bliss for her. I don't
Yeah, I
know
was
if he
like,
actually
probably
like
loved
ate
it.
anything in
What?
there, but yeah, it made us like really want to build an awesome paludarium someday for some rhinos.
Yeah.
That would
And
be a
see, I
great
had
species
that.
to do that with.
I had that thought when Justin got baby rhinos eating tadpoles. I
Yeah.
had that thought. I was like, dude, these things would probably freaking love something like a paludarium, dude. Like they would kill it with all the water, you know. Like if they'll eat tadpoles over like anything else, yeah, you know, in the wild they're killing it around,
Yep.
you know, bigger
Yeah, that
bodies
would
of
be
water with frogs and
really
stuff.
cool to
Like,
get to watch them make use of
yeah,
aquatic, terrestrial, and our own setup.
yeah.
Which is interesting too, because I've offered mine pieces of frog leg, and they
Nothing?
no reaction whatsoever.
Huh.
They smell it, and then they just kind of look at you like, what the hell do you want me to do with this?
Yeah, I wonder if after a certain point, like with some of these other alternative
Right.
food offerings, once we have them so established on rodents, it's like how much of that instinct is gone. Like you get the snakes that normally that
Yeah.
species would be a constrictor that would coil it, but they just do the lazy grab because they know that. So similarly, the frog leg just doesn't trigger them.
And it's also, you know, maybe as they get older, you know, frogs really aren't on the diet as much, you know, like as babies,
Right.
maybe they're more out to eat some amphibians because they're smaller, easier to get a hold of. But as adults, they move on to more rodents, things like that. So they're not quite as interested, you know, like it's
I've
kind of
talked
moving up the food chain type of deal.
I've talked to Rob Stone a good bit about it. Because he, you know, I noticed if you feed them, if they get a decent sized meal that makes even sort of a slight-ish bulge, they go straight for the water bowl and they just hang out.
Yeah, he's talked about
He mentioned
it's like
sort
the
of
buoyancy.
Yeah, something about it, I guess, gives them some sort of relief. But if like my bigger animals, I'll give them 4 or 5 fuzzies, and it's like they still will go in their water bowl. It just doesn't seem like they spend as much time there. But they definitely seem to do a little better on smaller, more frequent meals than larger. And I think there's a nest rating sort of default for those older animals too. Like once they've moved away from fish and maybe tadpoles and stuff as neonates, like they definitely go more towards the trees, I think, and nest rating is definitely a bigger thing for them.
Have you ever tried to feed them quail eggs?
No, because none of mine have been big enough yet.
You should give that a go once they get. I know one of your
I've done
biggest
quail
should be big
chicks.
enough at this point. Oh yeah,
Yeah, I could probably try quail eggs now, but
yeah, you should try quail eggs and see if they do them. Because dude, I bet they would scarf down. If that's the case, if they're going to be nest raiders, then yeah, I would try some quail eggs and see if they'll scarf those down.
Yep.
Yeah,
and if they don't take that, if you like break off the top of the quail egg and kind of have it like the bowl there, like
right.
wonder if they just slurp it out of the quail chicks. Of the 4 adult rhinos that I have, 3 out of the 4 are all about it without hesitation. So
nice. But dude, I'm telling you, as far as escapees go, like with my black box rack, with my smaller stuff, I have it set up with the shims to where I cut off the end of a shim and I tape it to the back of the rack. And then I cut off the front of another shim and push it up front, and it pushes the whole tub up. Like, because the tubs are so long, if you just stick one up front, the back is still has that little bit of a gap. But if you raise it up enough, you cut that one piece, tape it to the back, and then that raises the back, then you have another one to push up front. It completely closes that. That's been my saving grace with these racks, man. I'm telling you, I haven't, since I've been doing that, I've had the smallest of smallest, Everglades rats in these black box racks with that. Yeah. And with that setup, dude, I haven't had anything get out. So I swear by it. If I even think it can get out of the standard gap in one of these racks, I do that. I cut a shim, tape it to the back, cut another shim, push it up front, done deal. Nothing has gotten out since. So anybody who needs it, that's the key, man. I'm telling you, that was the smartest thing I ever did.
So how are you keeping your rhinos currently? It sounds like you've kept them both in racks and in sort of cages. Are you keeping them singly? Are you keeping them in pairs? Like how are you doing that currently?
Yeah. So that original pair that I had, I talked about years ago, they were in those Rubbermaid all access cages. Currently, everything I have is just in racks, but we're definitely going to talk about some caging because they do. They've got the big water bowls. They spend a lot of time in there. They breed, so obviously there's some level of success. But I don't think that's necessarily the best means of measuring like true health and success of the animal. Because frankly, I'm just sick of having them in racks. I think the real telltale sign that they're not necessarily loving it is it's almost a challenge to put them back into the rack. And every time I try, they're like head dodging it and trying to get out and trying to climb up. So I would love to exhibit those natural behaviors. So yeah, that's a huge part of goals for this season is figuring out what type of caging I'm going to go with. I feel like you guys have some pretty strong opinions and options to offer. We can certainly talk about that.
We know a company. We know people.
We got you.
We got you. Yeah.
Cool. Use code THP10 at checkout.
THN. THN checkout.
Nice. Is it just THN or is it
just THN?
That's THN. Use code THN at checkout.
And I still feel like my hatchlings and my grow outs are going to spend a good amount of their time starting out in racks rather than arboreal cages. But anything that I'm holding back long term, as soon as it's big enough to thrive in a cage, it's going to get moved into a cage.
And it's funny you bring up the whole head bobbing, going out. So like what I've noticed with some of mine, and I've tried to pay a lot more attention to it with certain animals. I've noticed with a lot of mine, because like a lot of my snakes are in racks currently, but the way I have them set up, is very kind of involved. And most of my snakes are eager to go back in. Like as soon as I put them back in, they're like, you know, like slide right on in. And that kind of makes me feel better. Like, okay, they would
Yep.
rather be in their enclosures. Like they feel good. They feel
Yes.
safe in their enclosures. But I have certain animals that are like, no, I don't want to go back in. And I'm like, okay, so maybe I'm doing something wrong if they don't want to
Right.
be in there, because snakes, they shouldn't like you. Realistically, you're a big giant monkey with massive, you know, mitts for hands, you know, like you
They
scare
tolerate
them.
it best.
Yeah, they tolerate it at best. And so if they don't want to go back into the place that they live, then I feel like, you know, something might be off. But if they're eager, like put me back in my home, then they feel safe, they feel comfortable. But you know, it's I've never brought that up before, but it's something I have been paying a lot more attention
Mhm.
to recently, because I've noticed that with certain animals, you know, not wanting to go back in versus like, please put me back in my home. You know, like
Yeah, it's definitely
it's
species specific, I think, because the
right,
Jansenii are a prime example of that. It didn't
right,
matter if I had, so I had the male in the rack longer than the female, and that was
mm,
because the male was very good at jailbreaking just about anything I put him in.
right,
Um, and so I had to lock him down like Hannibal Lecter. But both of them, I mean, it's like if I have them out, if I'm having to clean the cage, which doesn't happen often, like they don't care where they're going. They just don't want it to be anywhere near me.
right,
And so they beeline for the hides. As soon as I walk in the room, they disappear.
right.
You know, the rhinos, it's the opposite. Like I walk in the room and they're instantly like, I have one of the males in particular. He like mushes his horn up against the cage and he's like rubbing it all around and stuff. And
Just worried
um,
it's gonna fall off one of these
yeah,
days.
yeah. And so I'll open the door and he'll just kind of sit there. Like all of a sudden he got his freedom and he's just like, oh, okay. Um, but then like the Bairds, it's kind of the same thing where sometimes I have a few that are in racks and they'll kind of like dodge it, and then I have some that are in sort of the V70s, like the bigger ones, and
Mhm.
they'll go right in there. So I definitely think there's something to be said there for sure. But rhinos are one of those ones, and the Jansenii, where you're kind of missing out if you have them in a rack. I think
Mhm. Yeah, just even not getting to see them all the time.
Yeah.
like that is
Just the
the
thought of
one
being able to walk
species.
into my room and see them all displayed there is so
Yeah,
much more appealing.
yeah.
And
I mean,
dude, like look
aside
at
from the
walking in.
chondros,
Yeah.
the rhinos are always out. My female is
Mhm.
much more seclusive than the two males are, but I walk into that room, and even my two younger ones that are now out of that god awful rack, and going into one of the bio-Gs soon, like they're always out. And
Yeah.
if they're not out when I come in the room and I don't see them within a few minutes, they're out and watching me and stuff. Like
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had another species that was, aside from maybe the Pituophis that I have currently, the southern, the Jani is like he wants nothing to do with me, but um, everything
Yeah.
else, like I've never had a snake that was out and about as much as the rhinos are.
Dude, I'm telling you,
Maybe Brettles.
every time I walk into Smitty's room, like the first thing I look at is that Bio-G stack, and like the rhinos are always out on those wooden perches, and the
Chilling on the perches.
Bio-Gs, they're just hanging out, sitting up there, just like looking, you know. And I'm like, dude, they freaking love it. They love it in
They
those
sleep on
cages,
those
man.
perches. They come out and
They're
hang out on
always
those
there.
perches.
Yeah.
Now, do you singly house your rhinos or do you cohab at all?
At the moment I do. I plan on keeping a pair together at some point when they get a little more size on them and they kind of outgrow those bio-Gs.
Put them in like
Um,
a 3-foot enclosure or something and keep them
yeah,
together. Yeah.
that's my plan. I still have a cube that I had a chondro in. I'm actually looking at it right now. It's collecting dust, and when I can figure out a good place to put it, then I may move them in there. It depends, because I'm also wanting to get rid of that camber rack and swap that out for like some XT3s instead. And those would definitely, like chondros would go in those singly, and then I'd probably keep a pair, and then maybe one of the other spare males can hang out in one too. But yeah, I definitely want to keep them together. I know Rob, it sounds like he keeps a lot of his together.
Yeah, I heard
Um,
Matt say recently he does as well in a
yeah.
reasonably large group. So
Hmm.
feeding sounds interesting in that
Yeah.
setup. I'd be
And
interested to know
that
how they do that successfully. But
I think a lot of snakes do better than we realize
yeah,
cohabbing, you know, because like a lot of like Chris Montross with a lot of his, southeastern colubrids, he keeps most of his together in pairs. and they do fine, you know, because they don't breed when they're not supposed to. You cool them down, like they do great. Me personally, the feeding thing has been what has deterred me from doing that
Right.
because I
I
did
don't
it
want to
for a
have to pry
while.
snakes apart.
Yeah,
It doesn't
exactly.
sound
Like
fun.
with my water snakes, it's a different story. I kind of put in a plate of frog legs and pinkies
Mhm.
all chopped
They
up, and
they they
they
sorted out
just
themselves.
yeah they kind of just go ham. But I had my Santa Rosa white oaks together for a while, and they were larger, subadults, pushing adult size, and feeding them was just a nightmare because you put one mouse in and they're both going for the same mouse, and
Yeah.
me, like, I'm not good at holding two mice at the same time, so I'd kind of go one by one, and so both be going for the same one, and then like I would feed them, and one would eat a lot faster than the other
Hmm.
one, and
Then
then
you have
it
to
would
fend it
start
off
going.
while the other finishes. And
Yeah, I'm sitting there having to watch him, and I'm having to grab the guy that just ate because he's going for the female's one that's like halfway down its gullet, but he's like, "Ooh, what's that?" And I'm like, "Don't freaking do that." So it's like, for me, it was just easier to monitor, so I've separated everything. Even a lot of my Nerodia, I have my bigger pairs together or bigger animals together, and I leave them as it is, like I said, and I just put out a plate and they sort it out,
yeah,
because they're more so they'll fight for it, but then once one wins, they're like, okay, screw you, I'll go get a different piece. So they're not ones to eat each other like garter snakes will. Garter snakes will straight up eat another
oh
garter
well.
snake because they're trying to get the same prey item. Like,
I
it
imagine it's like
happens.
the Lady and the Tramp scenario, but then it just
Exactly.
keeps
Yeah,
going.
exactly. And then rat snakes do the same thing. I've heard Montross, not that long ago, he told me about some fox snakes. He walked in and his female had his male like halfway swallowed, and he had to whip it out, and like it was fine, like both animals ended up
Oh
being
wow.
okay, but like I can't deal with that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not,
At
like,
least not
I'm not down.
unsupervised.
Yeah, like, and that just, for me, time is a huge factor. I work a lot, I'm busy, like I can't sit there and watch every single snake eat every single meal all the way down and be like, okay, you guys good, and then move on with my life.
Right.
Like, it takes 4 or 5 hours to feed everything as it is. So it's a process, and time is money. Let's all face it. So I don't know, it's just easier for me to keep individually. I don't like it because I could save a lot of space keeping in pairs, but it's easier to monitor pooping habits and feeding habits and all of that, making sure everybody gets the proper meals. But I don't
Mhm.
know, it's the feeding aspect is what got me with a lot of it. So
Yeah, I want to keep them together though. I think I have an empty BioG that one chondro was in. It got moved to the Cambro rack, so I'm probably going to keep the two young ones together. I have a pair from Terry Burwell that are going to go in that. I think I just got to go in there and clean it out and swap out the cypress and stuff. And I ordered more of those Manzanita perches too. So when those get here, I definitely want to add more.
dude, once I get some BioGs, I'm getting a ton of those Manzanita perches, man. Those things are freaking awesome.
Yeah,
They're perfect in those BioGs.
it's the ones that are made for like birds, but they
Mhm.
have like the wing nut and the washer. And so I drill a small, appropriately sized hole and attach them right to the inside of the black box cages, and they
They
work
look
perfectly,
and they
and
look
they look good.
awesome. They look freaking awesome, man. Like, it's great. Those are fantastic perches, especially for those BioGs. With a bigger animal, it might be kind of hard for them to get the surface area they need.
You can
Like
just get bigger perches though. They have them in different sizes.
oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
I might have to look
I
into
just
that.
get those sizes because that's what fits in those
Yeah,
BioGs, no problem.
for
So,
sure. Sure.
And I like those. Those are nice too because that Manzanita is a nice hardwood. You don't have to worry about it molding or anything weird like that. And then I have the pothos in there that's growing crazy, like growing like unbelievably well in those cages
Nice.
too. So,
Oh.
oh,
You just having Wi-Fi connection problems at times. We're loading.
boy, you like this shirt?
Boy, I love that shirt, man.
I
That
added.
thing
You see,
is
I
lit.
added the
Yeah,
THM
I did
to the
notice
top
that. I
there.
was like, there you go, there you go. I like it. So could we do the opposite and do one in black and have the yellow logo? Is that a
Yeah,
possibility?
this was like one of the shirts we had in my size,
Okay.
and I don't know. I like the yellow, but I definitely want to do like a military green with like a tan eggshell colored art.
Yeah,
So,
that would be cool. That'd be cool. Offer them some different colors. But yeah, no, dude, it looks great. I love the detail in like the tower and the snakes. Like it
mhm.
looks a million times better than those
Those
Teespring
Teespring ones
ones.
we got, yeah.
Mine came out terrible, dude. I ordered
Mhm.
mine and I got a black shirt, but most of them were, the logo was supposed to be yellow. Mine came out like this
Like a
weird
weird
green,
green.
like kind of a throw up green color. And I was like,
Yeah.
what the hell is this? Like, but those, dude, those are fantastic. Those look great. You're doing phenomenal with those shirts, man.
I gotta place an order and make a bunch.
Yeah, I need to put out a feeler for anybody that wants some long leaf reptilia shirts and
I
place
need to
a
get
bigger
another one
order.
made because the one I got I got a size too small.
Mhm.
Because I think that was before I found these soft styles, and we did the next levels. I think,
Mhm.
and those next levels they run small,
Mhm.
and I don't know. These soft styles are so much better. But
Yeah. I don't know, man. I love the shirt that I got from you. That thing is freaking fantastic. So, but anyways,
yeah,
I think internet's back and cooperating now. Sorry, I
there we
got
good,
go.
good.
booted for a moment there. I'm not even in a hurricane, man. I have no
Yeah,
excuse.
it happens.
Yeah, that's all
We
right.
struggle with it all the time.
Yeah,
Yep.
way too often. But
So breeding wise, what's sort of your timeline for when do you start cooling things? What's the process there?
hmm Yeah. So I think breeding wise, it's gonna do a lot of what we were talking about earlier with just don't overcomplicate it. I treat all my rat snakes the exact same for breeding, and everything's producing. So I stop feeding right around October 1st, and I give them 4 to 6 weeks to clear out before I start cooling for brumation. I do brumate. Um, and so mid-November is when I'm gonna, if they have any supplemental heat, room starts cooling down naturally a little bit. And I just have one room that I keep everything in. I don't have like a heated garage or something that will get colder but not too cold. So the way I worked it out last year so that I could have some animals brumating and some animals not is I moved the whole brumating rack right up against the window that's in this room. And I got some of that 2 inch thick rigid foam board from Home Depot and essentially constructed a cabinet around the window and the whole window. And I was able to just crack the window open a little bit. I had a sensor push in there so I could keep tabs on the temperature at all times. And it was like sitting around 50 to 60 degrees throughout the entire winter in that cabinet. Rest of the room was 70 to 75 degrees ambient, just other side of that foam. So I
wow,
think, yeah,
that's
it kind of
awesome,
came out of
dude.
desperation
Yeah,
of wanting to adequately cool them. And because I think the year before, cooling down the entire room some, but leaving heat on for the animals that weren't brumating. And I think that just got the ambient for those non-brumating animals way too low. And the animals that did brumate only got down to 60 to 65. So I just wanted it a little bit colder. And yeah, this gave me the best of both worlds. And I think that's something that a lot of people could look at as an option if they live in at least a part of the country where it is getting cold enough outside. Because you can
yeah.
open that window as literal much as is going to do the trick. Um, and yeah, if you don't have coolers or a cold basement, everybody's got a window to move a rack next to and build a cabinet around.
That's fantastic, man. That's such a smart idea because even with that, you could make it as big or as small as you wanted.
Yep. Yeah.
Depending on your room size, you could
Right.
build a whole half wall around one window
Yeah.
and then put a bunch of stuff in there. That's ingenious, dude. I love that. That's
It worked well.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a somewhere down my Instagram feed. There's a picture of that with the rack set up against the window and the foam board
Yeah.
all around it.
Yeah, we're lucky down here where like it'll get cold enough in the winter for us to stick all of our colubrids in the garage. I just moved into a
hmm
house where I actually have a garage now.
Yeah.
So all my colubrids are going to go in external tubs and just get stuck in the garage for two
hmm
months. So, but that's the thing with us. we don't get the harsh winter, so
Yeah.
we can it'll stay around 50 degrees,
Yeah.
50, mid 50s in our garages, and we'll be fine all winter. With you, you can't do that because your
Yeah, and I
garage,
hear some
if y'all have a
people
garage, it's gonna get
I do,
cold, cold.
and some people in this climate, they would do something similar where they build, like, a little enclosed
Hmm.
structure in their garage where it's colder and just heat it up so it's at that 50 or 55 degrees, but that just makes me way too that does fail.
Right.
Um, everything's freezing, as opposed to in my setup, if I don't know, the rest of the room's gonna get a little bit colder for a short period of time, but
Right.
nothing for anybody.
Yeah, and that's like even with your stuff that doesn't need a serious drop, like you always want that slight drop in the winter
Yeah.
for even your stuff that doesn't need the serious, that's a room droppage is never bad in the winter because no matter what we keep, there's gonna be variances depending on the seasons, whether
Right.
it be, 5-10 degrees versus 30-40 degrees, like
Mhm.
some animals need that, but having that slight drop as an ambient in your room is never a bad thing, at all.
Sure.
So
So,
that's
yeah, I found 50 to 60 degrees is my goal temp for
mhm,
brumation. So again, that's like mid-November that I start cooling them down, and then sometime throughout the month of February, definitely before March, I start warming them back up. So for me, that looks like just first closing the window in that cabinet where they're still at, and
mhm,
I open the doors to that cabinet, let it acclimate to the ambient of the rest of the room, and then eventually they go back into their other enclosures and they get their hot spots back.
yeah,
And I don't wait for like a post brumation shed or anything. I start feeding once they've been warmed up for days. And then I just keep them on a pretty set schedule the rest of the breeding season until I'm getting eggs. So I try to feed on Sundays. That can vary a little bit. And I give them till about Wednesday to kind of just chill and digest. And then I pair snakes on Wednesdays and then I leave them together until Saturday and separate and feed on Sunday and just repeat again. And there's some variability of that if I'm like gone or busy on the weekends. It doesn't always happen on that same cycle.
right.
I just keep at it, and sometimes I check in and I witness some locks. Other times I just am sure that I'm pairing them enough so that something is likely happening, and it's always worked out.
Yeah, and it's never a bad thing to not keep on the same exact schedule.
Right.
Like, because let's face it, like it's feeding every 7 days on the dot is not a natural
Nope.
cycle. Like
Yeah.
it's not, So like we all try to keep it around 7 days, but realistically it's between 6 and 10. Like,
Sure.
that's just how it goes, But with that all in mind, what animals, with what you keep, what animals do you cool down to that 50 to 60 degrees versus the stuff that you leave in, your ambience, just having a
Yeah.
couple degrees
So
drop?
the only stuff that I do not currently and would not cool down to that temp is stuff that's not breeding.
Okay.
Yeah. So babies or
Yeah.
juveniles, subadults that are
Gotcha.
still growing up. Just
Yeah.
'cause I know I totally could. I could take them down to that temp, but I don't think
Yeah.
I'd just rather keep them warm, keep them eating, and keep them growing throughout the winter.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think with stuff that's a little bit more, wild per se, some of your scrub pythons like Moluccans, and then, your things like, um, some certain pythons that are a little bit more rare, I think those are ones that would benefit from cooling down even as babies,
Getting them into like
um,
a cycle, a
yeah,
familiar.
keeping them in that cycle, because I
Mhm.
think that goes a long ways, so, stuff like Mullikins where people seem like they're changing everything they do every year. That's not going to do well, keep them on the same cycle from hatching to adulthood, and then,
Yep.
that can help. But some of your colubrids, like, it's not necessary, you don't
I
have
guess I
to
will add
do
the
that.
caveat too, like my 100 flower rat snake hatchlings,
Hmm.
they do get brumated.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
in my experience, the hatchlings will not eat that first fall.
Oh,
They
okay, there's
actually
like a
almost require
diapause thing kind
brumation.
of going on.
Yep, and then in the spring, I start offering. I didn't even have success with frozen thawed pinks right away. I had to just start offering live pinks, and slowly over the first couple weeks in the spring, they started taking them.
You
Um,
know, and I have heard that even with like, your more basic southeastern rat snakes, like don't I've heard people say don't force them to eat, and
yep,
then if winter comes and they still haven't eaten, cool them down. Cool them
yep,
down for
yeah, and I
2
had
months, and then normally when they come out of brumation, they'll start eating. Like
yeah,
that's
and I
a
think
yeah,
any hatchling colubrid that you're having trouble getting it to eat when it hatches in the fall, I'd recommend trying that out, even just a short
yeah,
cooling period of a couple weeks, and it should help.
yeah. Yeah, because
I
dude,
think
if you force something down, something really small that isn't eating on its own, if you force it down, like it's gonna crash quick.
Mhm.
Like once you start that metabolism, you can't turn it off. You
Right.
know what I mean? So
I mean, I
it's
think
gonna crash immediately, just
that's the
about.
case with that one Dion's that isn't eating. Like it's
Hmm.
not losing any weight. It's
Yeah,
completely healthy. Like it's active. It's body tone and stuff. It's fine. I think maybe it is just a case of it.
yeah,
You got to cool it down, and maybe in spring it'll come around. So who
yeah.
knows?
So last season I had a black milk snake hatchling that it did not eat in the fall. I brumated it through the winter. It still would not eat in the spring. This thing was literally 8 months old before it ever took its first meal. And so I'm not into assist feeding, force feeding.
Yeah.
Usually I'm of the thought that like if this thing is not going to naturally thrive, like it's probably best that we're not raising it up and it's somebody passing it on and having them potentially pass that on as well. Uh,
Right.
um, Kind of more experimentally, I wanted to try it out and see what happened if I did start that metabolism. Would it have any luck on eating on its own? So I gave just a little snip of a rat tail, and I did have to force that all the way down. But within uh, basically the next time I offered a pinky, just leaving it in there, take it, frozen thawed pinky. So it something to be said. It can work sometimes, but it's not
Yeah,
preferred.
and see, I had the opposite experience. I had a buddy of ours sent me a pair of Everglades rats that had never eaten. They were
Yeah,
basically fresh out of the egg, and the male ate right off the rip, no problem. Frozen thawed pink off the tongs, like it ate right
yeah,
there. It was perfect. Female, on the other hand, would not eat for nothing. Went months without food, and I started to see it kind of lose weight. And I was like, okay, we got to get something in this thing. So I assist fed it a mouse tail. I got it most of the way down, twisted it down its neck, and then she kind of took it the rest of the way. And then within 2 weeks, it crashed because
hmm
she still didn't want to eat on her own. I didn't want to keep assist feeding tails, but because I
right.
started the metabolism, she crashed almost
Oh yeah,
immediately.
yeah. They'll
You
eat up all
know,
those stores real quick.
yeah, right there, with that one mouse tail, it was gone in 2 weeks.
Yep.
So it was like, I was hoping that I would kickstart it to like want to eat type of deal, but like I almost wish I would have waited, cooled down instead of, because I'm pretty sure it was in the winter when I tried to assist feed it. But I really wish I would have cooled it down versus trying to
Yeah.
assist feed, because
Yeah. I
that
think
can
if
I
you
feel
have
like
the
that
option
can
to
be
cool it
the
down, always try that first. But I think it's a last ditch effort if you're deciding to
yeah,
go that way.
yeah. But it was
You're
definitely it was a
along
learning
and
curve, like
yep,
it sucked. It sucked. Like I hated myself for it,
yep,
but it happens, but it was a good learning. It was a good learning tool, to like not really do that. Like I won't as there's certain things like Justin with your cyanea, like those you kind of have to assist feed mouse tails to start them off, but stuff like rat snakes, like I'm of the opinion if it's not going to eat, it's not meant to be, and don't make it eat, cool it down. If it's still not going to eat, then what are you going to do, but I don't know,
yep,
it really changed my perspective on assist feeding for stuff like southeastern rat snakes. So
hmm
but,
yep. So as far as back to breeding rhinos, most commonly I get clutches being laid mid June to early July, and again that's starting at about March 1st, feeding and pairing. Um, and in the past I've tried putting eggs directly like into a substrate. I use vermiculite most of the time,
Hmm.
kind of the half buried. And I think last year I did have a clutch that got a little too wet and I didn't ventilate it enough either.
mhm.
And at almost full development, one of those clutches ended up all but one died last year. So this
Oh,
year I did put everything on light diffuser panel. And so the vermiculite can be plenty moist, but it keeps the eggs out of that direct contact. And also just using like a thumbtack, I just put tiny, tiny pinholes in that egg box. And it was enough ventilation to keep air moving, keep plenty of oxygen available for those eggs, but not so much that it was able to let in flies or
yeah.
dry the eggs out. So I will definitely, from here on out, I will set up all my eggs that way with and using a little bit of suspension
Yeah.
off the substrate. But
Yeah.
I incubate a little bit cooler than a lot of people might. Had my incubator set at 78 degrees, and
Okay.
it took about 76 days for both rhino clutches that I had this year to hatch at that temperature. Um,
Do you
something I
know
heard Rob.
the
Yeah, go
weight
ahead.
of the female that laid, or multiple females? Do you know their rough weight at all?
I don't
Age?
weigh. Yeah, so age, they were 4 years old at
Okay.
the first time I attempted breeding them or had
Mm.
success breeding them, um, or they were, I guess, coming into their fourth
Mm-hmm.
year. Yeah, I don't weigh them. They're probably surprisingly smaller than what you might think.
Well, that's what I'm trying to
They,
figure out, because I have my reverse trio, and I want to say
Here, let me
they're
just grab one. We can
yeah,
check
because
out the size.
I'm trying to think. Mine were probably close to yearlings when I got them. And I've had them for. I need to go back and look. They're probably approaching like 3.
I was gonna say I think yours would be around 3.
Okay, that's about the same size as mine.
Yep.
Maybe mine are a tad smaller.
Your females?
All 3 of them.
And I mean, this girl would be 5 years old at this point, going on 6. So she was probably a little smaller last year. But yeah, I mean, they're just a bit smaller of a rat snake overall than a lot of
Right.
other
Yeah.
the North American species, especially. Yeah, of the 2 clutches I had this year, one of them laid 9 eggs, and they were decently
Oh
sized,
wow.
pretty big eggs. The other laid 14 eggs,
Oh, good God.
and they were a little bit smaller, some of them, but everything hatched and everything was able to take. We'll
Wow.
talk about babies in a minute here, but like I said,
Yeah.
with the rosy reds and eventually the pinkies, but after like just two rosy red meals, they were able to take day old pinks, no problem. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
again, I don't weigh them, but some of these are like 2 grams, I think, as hatchlings. So
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know weight isn't exactly the best thing to go off of. I'm
yeah,
just curious because
Yeah.
it's hard to gauge. Like I feed my rhinos more regularly than most of my other colubrids, and it's mostly if I'm feeding like pinkies and fuzzies to other stuff. I usually have a few extras that I'll throw to
hmm
them, especially the younger ones. Um, but I don't know. I mean, like I said, I think I need to go back and look, but I think mine might be approaching the 3-year mark.
okay,
And I'm planning on cooling them down this year for sure, because I'm cooling down pretty much anything that's an adult, or sub-adult.
yeah. I've heard of some people having success at that 3 year mark, so it might work out. But if you're not in a rush and you want to give them that extra year,
Yeah.
they'll probably do much better the next year.
I've always been under the impression for most things, some animals need to go a bit longer, but for most animals, especially females, 4 years is kind of that money
Yep.
zone,
When they're
At
really,
least-
really in it. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people try and shoot for 3, but I feel like if you shoot for 3, you're pushing it. You're feeding heavily, and they may give you a couple good eggs, but a bunch of
hmm
duds. And if that happens, in my opinion, I think it wasn't necessarily good for them.
Right.
That's
You
that may
likely
not, yeah, that may not be
heavily
the,
enough that they have some obesity, and then that's going to lead to
Mm-hmm.
constriction of the oviducts and possible egg
yeah.
retention and all that.
Yeah,
So,
I know a lot of people probably aren't going to like hearing that, but that's my personal opinion. That for
yep.
most things, 4 years is kind of that that money zone. 3 years, yeah, it can be done, but it's probably not going to be the healthiest clutch. It's probably not going to be good for the girl. Just give them an extra year.
Sure.
Like what's
And I think we're so
the
used to
harm?
hearing, like in the industry, especially, like people are pushing to breed females at like 18 months, 2 years old. And so we think that like it works for them
Yeah.
most of the time, but we think that's like the rule and not the exception. And we can apply that to all these other species. But
And you also have to think
yep,
that in captivity, most snakes only live 8 to 10 years.
right.
Like that says something. At least to me. Like
Sure.
me, for my carpets, if my carpets die before they're 15, I'm not going to be satisfied. That's just me. Like I think if something dies at 10 years old, unless there's added problems, like cancers. Like obviously when a snake hits 10 years old, cancers can definitely come about, all that stuff. But I think in captivity, if all your stuff is dying at around the 8 to 10 year mark, like you're doing something wrong.
Yep.
That's just me. If there's no extra problems, then like I think snakes on average should live 15 to 20 years. That's just my opinion. Maybe I'm full of crap, but that's just me. But
Long life, definitely better.
yeah, for
But
sure.
yeah, so
The
about
slow
4 years
growth
old is going
route
to be
is always, yeah.
the sweet spot. The
Yeah.
males will probably breed a little bit younger than the
Yeah,
females.
males are definitely a different exception.
Yep.
Those will around 2-3 years, they're probably ready to rock and roll. But those females, you want to give them that extra time if you can.
So as for feeding the babies, this is going to be a fun part of the conversation. I feel like this is a big setback for a lot of people, and there's definitely plenty of different thoughts and opinions on methods to do it. And I've tried a couple different ways myself. I think the most common ways we hear about are either feeding in the water and then putting the pinky in the water starting out. That's what I did this year. Some people want to avoid the feeder fish because of the parasite load, and there's definitely some validity to that. But um, I think I don't know, it's a toss up on whether we're worrying about that maybe a little bit more than we necessarily need to. So last year I did try completely fish free, and I just did a tease feeding technique. Terry actually put out a great video sometime last year about this, and it works. You can get them all started. Um, it just takes forever, makes you want to tear your hair out, and then when you sell that Rhino to somebody, if they're not able to do it exactly the way you are,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily going to establish as well for them.
Right.
So um, yeah, this year, and just the less you can worry about them, the less you can try to complicate it, the better they seem to do. I've done all rosies this year. Some of them, I only have one out of the 21 babies that I hatched this year that seems to have no interest in rosies, and so I did do the tease feeding with that one, and eventually they turn around and taken it off the tongues pretty well. But hands off is easier, especially with 21 babies. Like I do not have the time. It can take
Yeah.
20 to 30 minutes a single baby.
Yeah.
Not to mention the more stress I get, the more stress they are probably going to get. So yeah, currently my technique, I just use a little 3.25 ounce water cup, and I put 1 to 2 rosies in there, and as small pinks as I can find, I drop that right in the cup, and they take everything. And just this last feeding, I started trying just the pinkies, and only like 5 of the 20 didn't take the pinky alone.
Oh
Um,
wow.
so it's usually in the evening that I'm dropping all those things in. Most everything is eaten by the time I check in the morning. If they haven't eaten, I just leave it while I'm gone for work, and then check again after work. And at least a few more have taken the pinky by that time. So it's super easy now. It's as easy as dropping drop feeding anything else. So I really don't think there needs to be as much concern about getting babies as a lot of people have seemed to think there is. And
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
again,
super curious to see if you got like frozen tilapia and just tried very small slivers of that in a water
yeah,
bowl with pinkies.
Yeah, potentially. I think the motion has a lot more to do with it
Yeah.
on the
For
rosies
sure.
drawing them in.
For sure.
Because the original pair that I had long time ago, like when I got the female, she was totally established on Pinky's tail. He did need some rosies, and to transition him onto just the pinkies, I actually had like this long, really thin wooden stick that when the pinky was in the water bowl, I would make contact with the pinky and wiggle it, and so the pinky was like flailing around a little bit in the water dish, and that really drew him in, that motion, and then he'd go for it, and I was able to slowly transition that to reaching the pinky in with the tongs into the water bowl and moving it around, and eventually just offering the pinky on the tongs.
Yeah.
Um, I have tried last year with some picky ones, like the frog reptilinks as well, and they had zero interest in that. So,
Hmm.
Yeah.
but yeah, man, you could definitely try out the tilapia.
I just my
Who
main
knows?
concern is like not having access to rosy reds, because I'm sure if
Oh, really?
I go to PetSmart on a regular basis, I'm
Yeah.
like, hey, I need 10 rosy reds, and then I show up again next week, hey, I need 10 rosy reds. They're probably going to be like, what are you? Because you know how they're weird about selling things that are going to be feeders.
Oh,
Well, see,
well, those
that's
I
the
think they
thing.
stock specifically as feeder fish.
Yeah, so
Oh,
the
really?
rosy
Yeah.
reds, like having being one of the douchebags that worked at PetSmart for a long time, they sell. So those two, they have two tanks down at the bottom that are specifically feeders. They have the tiny
Yeah.
little
Okay.
goldfish, and then the rosy reds. Those are sold as feeders. Now, if you go try and buy
Gotcha.
live mice,
Right.
that's going to be a completely different story. But those big tanks of the goldfish and the rosy reds, those are sold specifically for feeders, and those are.
Mhm.
But normally they're for like your African cichlids and
All right.
stuff.
Your
Like you put
Oscars
them
and
in
stuff.
for your, because a lot of those fish will only eat live fish. So your cichlids need those rosy reds, so they supply those normally, and that's what that was actually
I
going to
got
be my follow up question. PJ, is where you get
Yeah.
your rosy reds
Yeah.
on a
Just any
PetSmart,
box pet
Petco.
store. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
got a Pet Supplies Plus closer to me. I used to go to Petco, the place I used to live. Yeah, and sometimes they do ask, "What are you feeding?" And I say, "Yeah, I've got a bunch of hatchling rhinoceros rat snakes," and they think it sounds cool. They've never heard of it. I show them a
Yeah.
picture, and it makes
Your
their
life
day because
life
yeah,
has
even
changed
pet store
forever.
employees have often never heard of anything
Yeah.
outside of the common big box stuff. So
Yeah. No. So those that was going to be my follow up, is where you got them. But yeah, no, that's good to know, because like, yeah, those rosy reds and then the little goldfish are normally sold
yeah, and
specifically for
I've heard the
feeders.
goldfish can be quite a bit more nasty
Yeah, I
personally.
would
So stay
never,
away from those. Don't.
I would never feed
Yeah,
those to snakes. But yeah, no, the rosies, yeah, they normally, and the rosies are normally in stock pretty much all the
yep.
time. Those
And it
again,
can
being,
vary the
yeah,
size they have available.
yeah,
Sometimes they're like
for
super
sure.
tiny. Sometimes rhino babies, they can take, if they're interested in it, they can take a surprisingly large prey item.
Yeah, and
Um,
those
yeah,
rosies, they get, if you get some of the big ones, you can get some pretty chunky rosies. But
yeah,
even then, like, I saw thousands upon thousands of rosies, putting them into their tanks, again, working for two different PetSmarts, as a younger person, they get a ton of those things in, and your biggest rosie, there's no way your smallest rhino cannot take the biggest rosie PetSmart has to offer.
yeah,
That's just, you know, so.
What are
Yeah.
your
yeah,
thoughts on the blue line? You think there's a legit blue
yeah.
line of rhino?
So let's talk about that because yeah, I saw there's a video going around recently of a snake that was at the one of the Canadian reptile expos. Did you see this? They're actually calling it an axanthic rhino.
Hmm. I haven't
Yeah.
watched it. I've
Really?
heard about it.
Okay.
I've been meaning to go check it out just out of curiosity, but I have not watched it yet.
Yep. So it's an insane looking snake, that is for sure. I think that in a polygenic sense, there's definitely some lines of rhinos that have been selected for higher blues than others. One of them, the males I have, he's definitely a lot more of a yellowish green than a bluish green, but others have a decent amount of blue in them. So as far as this one in this video being a systemic, like they've apparently had a couple generations where they've been seeing a lot of this high blue. The thing about an axanthic animal is if it's truly like a recessive axanthic trait, it should be lacking like all yellow pigment. But you can even see in this video that it does have some like definite green on the
Yeah.
back. Like the head is super blue, the chin is pretty blue, but there's still green on there. So that means
Right.
there is still yellow pigment because the green of the snake is coming from the combination of the blue and the yellow combining. So I if something like that exists, like I'm all for it. I think the wild types of these animals are awesome. I'm not against morphs at all, but I'm just not convinced that we have a simple recessive morph in rhinos yet. But yeah,
And that
polygenic wise, we do seem to have some lines of
There's
blues that are
variation. Yeah.
yeah.
And when if to call it like, especially with exanthic stuff, like it's pretty much across the board to know if it's a true like morph, you really need to look at the eyes. You know,
Oh
like with
yeah.
exanthics, like the eye color is what like that's how with a lot of carpets. So with like Popwins specifically, you know, well, no, I'll even say coastals more specifically because some coastals can come out very gray, bluey color and still be normals, you know, and your head exanthics can look a lot like exanthics,
Right.
visually, but to tell them apart, you have to look at the eyes. Like the exanthics have the silver eyes,
Okay.
and like that's more of a trait for just the exanthic mutation versus a normal mutation. Like you'll see the difference in the eyes with the exanthics versus one that's just either line bred for to be that color or even a het, whatever. Like your true exanthics, like there will be a different color in the eyes.
Yeah.
So I think that that's something that people need to pay a little bit more attention to, that type of trait. But and again, I don't know that much about rhinos, especially when it comes to morphs when there's really none out there. But knowing a little bit about the exanthic trait, that's something that I would look for. Raise it up as an adult and then see what the difference is in the eye color, because I think that would be your kind of telltale sign. But
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's not necessarily like I agree that I'm sure there are lines that do have much more bluer tones to them, some more than others, but I don't like I know we see it a lot with like the European crowd, blue line rhinos, and we see a lot of pictures that are probably doctored to some degree. But
right, there's way too many good editing apps
it's
to
like,
make the
yeah,
snakes look
I
really.
don't know.
I'm not saying it's bad to do that. I'm just saying like a lot of people edit their stuff to make it look a whole lot more popping than it really
But one of the,
is.
I mean,
But
that male, one of those males that I have, he's like his
oh,
entire
dude,
lower half is baby
yeah,
blue.
it's yeah. You have some amazing animals that are just like almost straight blue.
Yeah, and
But
that's where I
then
see
the
a
other,
lot of the blue on them. It tends to be like right along the side of the belly.
Mhm.
It's super apparent, or I've seen some like splotching on the head. It's a
Yeah.
definite blue. Yeah.
So have
So
you
this is one of the
raised?
yearling females.
Yeah, have you raised any of those and noticed a trend in terms of clutches? As far as what do you notice a variation in a clutch between that
Um,
bluer stuff and the more green stuff?
Not so much yet. I don't have
Okay.
that sample time figured out yet. So this is one of my yearling females I held back from last year. Uh, Last year using rhinos. So yeah, give me a couple more years. We'll definitely have some data for you on
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, man, they're so awesome.
Yep.
So much fun. So what's up with the Russians, man?
Yeah. Okay. So Russians are the other species that I would say if I had to pick. Well, if I had to pick, I'd do that. But if I had to pick two, it's rhinos and Russians all day. And it's kind of hard to describe what the draw is for them. It's kind of like unless you've held one in your hands and just gotten to interact with it,
Mhm.
it's difficult to describe. But the high contrast black and yellow is super cool. They have heavily keeled scales. That's super cool. They get to a really decent size. And they're just all around docile. They're inquisitive. Here, I'm going to put this girl back and grab one of those guys.
I
Um,
remember seeing a video at one point of some girl that I guess was herping in an area that had Russians, and she had a pretty decent sized adult, and she's holding it, and that thing is just chowing down on her arm.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's just holding it. It's just friggin' giving it everything it's got.
So this is one of my females. Just to show you the size. I don't know how long she is. I don't measure, but
Wow.
decent size.
It's a big snake.
It's a nice high yellow on her.
Wow, that's beautiful.
So cool.
And these guys they'll eat pretty much anything you throw at them. I'd say the majority of what I feed them is like just weaned rats or jumbo mice. I've done chicken chicks, quail chicks. I even had a friend that had chickens, and they had some bantam chickens, smaller, and these things did eat whole bantam chicken eggs. I'd love to try some like frog legs or something. I have not found a spot around me that has that yet, but
Say
Walmart.
check Walmart. Our
Walmart,
Walmart carries
man.
frog legs. I
Yeah.
just bought a box.
I'm not in the South either, so I don't know if I'd have
But-
as much.
So
That's
there.
true. I didn't think about us being in the South with the Walmart.
Yeah.
Maybe the
Here's
Southern
the
Walmarts
issue.
around to carry them.
Okay, so I
Yeah.
just bought a box of frog legs, right, yesterday. And I went to go split them today because I cut them in half. And usually when I split them, I get about, I think, 26 or 28 individual legs.
Mhm.
I pull out these ones from this box, and I swear there's a couple that are like bigger than my hand across.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
They're huge, man.
And instead of having all these smaller pairs, I get a handful of bigger pairs. And some of these are so big, I don't have anything that can even eat something that size. So I'm probably going to end up thawing them out and just shaving off meat or something.
Yeah.
Geez, your
I'm
big,
like-
your bigger chondros could eat them.
The adult male, yeah, but literally, I don't have anything else that can take these things, man. Like
Even
they
your
are-
other,
they are-
even your other
yes,
chondros.
They are huge. The
Jeez.
legs are gigantic. I'll have to send you a picture.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking like a solid like 6 inches across. Like
Is that
thigh
even
high
like just the half or like together?
together? But even
Oh,
like
wow.
a half, like it's still
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
massive. And so I was kind of irritated because it was like, A, I got less pairs than I normally do in a box, and B, they're so freaking huge, most of them, that I
Yeah.
can't even feed them off. I mean, probably the female Jansen I could take one,
Yeah.
but that would be a pretty substantial meal for her,
Wow.
which actually wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing.
Wow, that is
Yeah.
surprising because that's not a small snake.
Like if it were the male Brettles, no problem.
yeah,
It'd be
that's
perfect.
yeah.
But
But your
freaking
your pythons though are built to take some pretty hefty meals. Like I've had a pretty small carpet that I accidentally fed a large rat to, and like it took a minute. It took a minute, but like, your pythons can take really big meals. Like surprisingly, Colubrids completely different story. They're not really built to take those massive
stretchy.
meals,
Yeah.
But the car like your pythons though, they can take some pretty hefty meals.
well, I mean, you look at the
so.
difference there. I mean, a lot of pythons are sit and wait ambush predators, so they're
Right.
they're more geared towards being able to
Right.
eat while they can, and then you have more active things like colubrids, most of them,
Right.
and Russians, and
Especially if
rhinos.
they're climbers, like
Yep.
things that are climbing up in the trees, raiding nests, or even ambushing birds in the trees. Like, yeah, they're not going to want a huge lump in there, and still try to navigate that too.
Mhm.
Right.
Have you
Yeah.
bred those? Have you bred Russians?
Yeah, so the last couple of years, unfortunately, did not have success. But in 2019 was the last time I got a clutch, and I have a holdback from that. And really, it wasn't so much of them being difficult to breed. That learning opportunity I had with the rhino eggs dying from lack of airflow, that took out a clutch of Russian eggs for me a couple years ago. Because the year before I did the exact same thing, the press and seal, no air holes, and they did fine. But for some reason, it took them out the other time a couple years ago, and then my male was just a little bit skinny coming out of that year, so I didn't roommate him last year. I gave him a year off, and at one point I still tried. Once he had regained to a healthy weight, I tried throwing them together, and this girl was building eggs, building follicles for a little while. No success on the clutch, but everyone's healthy, everyone's ready to go. So
how big are their clutches typically? Are they like
See, I
bigger
think that
clutches with
first.
smaller eggs, or are they smaller clutches with
So
bigger?
it's in my experience, I get like 8 to 10 eggs in a clutch.
Okay, so about
Um,
average
and I
sized
guess actually
eggs,
one
like nothing
year,
crazy either way.
yeah. So one year I did have it was just 5 eggs in the clutch that year that the eggs died in incubation. They were notably larger than the year before. So
Okay.
I'm not really sure what is driving that, but it can
Yeah,
vary.
it's odd that they're so keeled.
Yeah.
Because when you see them like that, and you see sort of the glossiness of them and the light bouncing off the skin,
Yeah.
you wouldn't think that they're keeled. But Billy had one at Daytona at his table, and I took it out and played with it. And the first thing that surprised me was how keeled they are. I mean, it's almost
Yep.
not as much as Pituovas, but definitely like up there.
Yeah.
And I always assumed they
Oh yeah,
were
it's
like smooth.
noticeable.
It's crazy.
Dude, I thought for sure you were going to be taking that one home for Billy at Daytona.
He wouldn't sell it to me for $100, so I had to pass. Every time I asked him, he just like completely ignored me.
He didn't even respond
He
to
didn't.
you.
I'm like, Billy, I was like, Billy, man, nobody wants these rushers, man. Let me get one for $100. Just no response.
He just look at you and then start talking to
Yep,
somebody
yep.
else.
You just smile at me and just keep going. So no,
Yeah.
I've wanted
Yeah,
some
and
for a
this is
really
another
long
species
time
I don't know why they're not more popular. I really don't get it. Like there's someone's
because
got a
they,
bunch on Morph Market right now that have just been
yeah,
sitting there for a great price and they're not moving. So
I was
Dude,
looking at
I'm telling you, man, it's the not flashiness of them.
yeah, they don't
yeah,
That's
have
the
the
thing.
neon colors.
People love bright colors. People
yep,
love, these vibrant colors. And like when you have a snake that's mostly black, like it's just
Just a fancy Eastern King.
exactly,
yep.
like a lot of people look at it and be like, blah, you have to have guys like us that appreciate this type of things. Like, man, I love my dark tone stuff. Me, I'm a big ground tone guy. I love ground tone animals, like I'm not like bright colors are amazing, but I love the stuff that's going to be nice and dark and
For me,
ground colors.
it's just the fact that they come from a place that doesn't have a lot of herps to begin with. That's kind of
Yep.
why I like the Diones and stuff as well. Is like they
Yeah.
come from habitats that you don't like on paper reptiles shouldn't be living in.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're perfectly designed for that kind of thing. And I don't I'm right there with you. I think they're awesome. Like I like those more than I like the Koreans.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
no,
Yeah,
I
I
think
don't
the
have any
Koreans are
Russians are
experience
cool,
with
but
freaking
those, but
awesome.
yeah, and there are actually a couple morphs with the Russians. Like I think the wild type, especially the high yellow, is always going to be my favorite.
mhm.
But there are Rhinos or amelanistics, pretty much the same thing, depending on what you want to call it. There are melanistics, so an all black, which looks pretty awesome, and there are axanthics as well. I think over in Europe they're calling them aneries. I think from what I know about anery and axanthic is a more appropriate term since they are lacking the yellows instead of lacking reds. But I'm not Travis. We'll let him put his 2 cents on there sometime.
Yeah,
He sends
yeah.
us a message after just about every episode
Yeah,
saying,
yeah.
I love
"Oh,
it, dude.
here's what
I
you
always
got
wait.
wrong."
I always wait for Travis's message after every episode just to kind of
Right.
cue us in on a few things. Like,
Yep. We'll get my
it's
report
also
card.
I freaking love that guy, man.
Yeah.
Travis is freaking fantastic. He's so great. I love his messages after every episode, even if it's not a "Hey, you're wrong." It's a "Hey, let me give you more information about
Yeah, yeah.
this."
He's such a great
Like,
resource. Yeah.
yeah, he's fantastic. Definitely one of my favorite people in the
Even
hobby.
if he's like, "Hey, you're wrong." I'm like, "Yes, sir."
Yeah, you're
Yep.
right. I know.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
sorry.
Okay. But
We love him no matter how many people who aren't doctors might disagree with him.
we're not even going to get into that.
Uh,
Good God. That guy. Oh.
So
Oh.
in this
Russian.
collection going forward, yeah, I still have a variety of things, and we can talk a little bit more about some of that. But my focus is really going to be Russians, and I'll continue growing the Western hogs a little bit.
Yeah,
As
that
for the
was going to.
Russians, like I mentioned earlier, like wild type's awesome. I'm not afraid of morphs though, so I actually am working on importing a group of some various morph Russians from Canada.
Well,
Well, if
let's.
anyone's listening and they have a Russian that they would love to trade for 5 baby thorn scrub rats, let me know.
Sorry, of course, that was exactly when my internet was kind of spacing out. But yeah, what were you saying?
I said if anybody has a baby Russian that they want to trade for 5 thorn scrub rats,
Oh
straight
yeah,
up, I'm your guy.
There you go, man. But yeah, so since you brought up the hognose snakes, I mean, let's before we wrap this sucker up, we got about 20 more minutes left in this thing. Let's talk about some hognose snakes,
sure.
man. That's they've been hognoses have been a love of mine for such a long time. I had a pair of westerns for a long time, but I got rid of them in Texas when I started focusing more on colubrids. I'm trying to get a pair of normals now because I'm a very wild type oriented guy, so I'm trying to get some normal westerns. But let's talk about what you're trying to work with, on your western hogs, man. Because I mean, those are
Yeah.
freaking awesome animals, amazing.
So
animals.
getting into the westerns was actually a big decision for me because everything else just being like ambient room temp, I had to decide to commit some rack space to that higher hot spot. I think I've got it set to like 86 to 87 degrees. So the collection is definitely building now. I did have my first clutch of hognose just from the ones that were old enough this year. So I had some success in breeding, and that was just a Conda female bred to an male. Kind of just trying my hand to see if I can even do this. But as for what I've got growing up, I've got some stuff for the Coral Project, Toxic, My Ties, and Storm Clouds. Those are the 4 projects that I'm going to be working, and those are all double recessive. So that's kind of the fun part about the hognose too, is it's almost all recessive and multi-recessive. There's a lot of longevity to it, a lot of playing the odds, and I think that adds a lot of stability to that market, if you will.
No, absolutely. And I've only of those morphs you've listed, I've heard of 2 of those.
Okay.
Which
ones are you unclear of? Okay, the condas, yeah.
So I know condas and I know corals. But even then, coral glows, I don't really know the morphs behind them. I know condas are the one recessive.
It's like a partial reduction of the pattern, and then the super form of the conda is a fully patternless, except for some on the head.
Yeah, those I know. So when I was getting deep into them a little bit more, the super condas were going for like $3,000 a pop.
Okay.
So
and they're just a couple $100.
Things
for
have
a base
changed.
Super conda now.
Yeah, things have changed a ton with those, but anaconda hogs are like my favorite morph. I love, and that's even just the normal anacondas, not the supers, because a patternless animal doesn't do a whole lot for me personally, but I love the look of a normal conda, and I think that adds so much into some of your morphs, especially like your albinos and coral glows. So, but the coral glows, I don't know what, because I know I'm pretty sure it's a double recessive, correct?
Yeah, so the corals are a combination of albino and lavender, which are both recessive traits. And those albinos, the hognose, there's some high red lines or higher yellow lines.
For sure.
Lavender is, of course, more of a purple lavender color. Some are even more pink, and there are some lines of lavenders where honestly it looks pretty brown. I'm not always as easily convinced there is lavender in it, but it is. Again, just variation within those recessive traits.
Is no one breeding just straight reds anymore?
There's the Raging Reds line that I can't remember the guy's name, but someone down at Daytona apparently had a lot of those, and man, those things are absolutely insane.
I don't know. I just I see. There's a couple years ago. I want to say maybe it was a Columbia. Someone had a table and they had two reds on it, and I was like, that's all I want. Just like in ball pythons, like a pastel or a Mojave.
And you can find that. There's definitely, it's probably going to have some hets for something, but you can find some awesome red animals that aren't even like the Raging Reds, because you're going to pay like $1,500 for one of these Raging Reds that's a normal, just
a regular red
line.
Good for me.
Hognose morphs are expensive, man.
It's
it's
a place you can sink some money for sure.
Yeah, they are definitely a good, if you want to get into a morph project for an animal that doesn't take up a lot of space, hogs are a very good investment.
And
investment species.
They sell well. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm getting some, And I feel like I'm probably going to be sitting on a lot of babies for a long time when that eventually happens, because I don't know if
Mhm.
anyone's going to want them, but I want to play with them. So
Yeah.
It's funny
but the
too
hogs
because had you told me, I don't know, 20 years ago that hog noses would be as big as they are, I probably would have
yeah,
kind of laughed a little bit. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Where did it all come from? It seems like everything just popped up almost overnight. Just it's moving so fast. Like there's so
Yeah.
many morphs now that I just keep seeing
yeah.
pop up that I've never heard of before, and I'm sure it's just combos of existing stuff. But
Yeah.
Yep.
No,
Yeah.
that's
Oftentimes when there's a new double recessive combo, it's getting a new name, or when it's got there's only a couple incomplete dominant traits. Again, the Conda is a incomplete dominant pattern trait, or the Arctic gene is it's a little bit more of a color gene, but it has a super form expression as well. So anytime you
okay.
take one of those like recessive or double combos, or people are starting to get close to triple recessive, it's got a new name. Then you throw Conda name, throw the Arctic in there, it's got another new name. So um, yeah, I
Yeah.
even get lost in some of that still.
Yeah. But what were the other two morphs that you're kind of focusing on with hogs?
Yeah, so there's the Coral Project. There's Toxic, which is a combination of the toffee belly and the axanthic genes. So it makes a
Okay.
really kind of gray animal.
Yeah. I know that I've heard of the toffee belly.
Okay. Then the Mai Tais are a combination of toffee belly and sable. Sable is a really
Okay.
darkening gene.
Yeah.
So it makes this like really kind of orangey brown, almost like cafe color. And then my favorite is the Storm Cloud, which is a combination of sable and axanthic, which these
Wow.
babies come out essentially blue and black. Um,
Oh, that's so cool.
those I
pretty
think I have
striking.
seen, and those are
Yeah,
nice.
there's one on Morph Market
Yeah.
right now, just a normal Storm Cloud male. He's going for like $6,500. So you're not seeing too many of those right now.
And everyone's complaining about chondro prices right now. Are you kidding me?
Dude,
Hogs
I'm
are
telling you, man,
You
hogs are
can
big
get
right
a
hognose,
now.
kick-ass chondro for that amount of money.
Oh yeah,
dude,
You can get a lot of
hognose
really nice
snakes.
chondros for that amount of money.
When it comes to hognose morphs, man, they're taking the lead as far as like, and it's well deserved because hognose babies are not easy, man.
Mhm.
Hognoses are not easy snakes. Once they're established, they're great, but the babies can be a pain in the
I don't
freaking
know if they're
ass,
as bad as they
man.
used to be, though. I think they've kind of come a long way with the
I think it's because people have kind of
route.
figured it
They
out,
figured the tricks out. Yeah.
they figured the tricks out, but you gotta put the effort into it. You know what I mean? Like you gotta go through the steps because they're not most hognose babies aren't gonna take a frozen thought pink right off the rip.
Nope. Yeah.
Like
Some of the
that's just
techniques people are having luck with these days is if you're just doing like an unscented frozen thawed pinky, you sometimes even scratch up the face a little bit to get some of
yeah,
those juices going, but you dip it in water. And with that bead of water on the nose of the pinky, you touch that to the mouth of the hog and let it start drinking off of that.
yep,
And that like gets that Jacobson's organ going. They get the scent, they get the flavor, and then they'll sometimes eat off of that.
yep,
But yeah, some people try tuna scenting, salmon scenting, frog or toad if you can get it. Um, I'm still struggling with some of the ones that I've hatched out this year, and hoping that I figure that
yeah,
out, because I've started getting into the hogs, so I need to make
yeah.
sure I can actually raise the babies.
Yeah, man, hogs are not easy, but when it comes to those morphs, man, like, and again, I think it has a lot to do like the money worth behind it. And again, I hate talking about things with like, I hate being like, oh, this is valuable because of XYZ, like that's
Sure.
not why any of us do this. But let's face it, it plays a factor, But like when it comes to hog noses, I think the biggest things that go into the price aspect of them is the fact that babies are not easy to get going, but it's also like you said, most of them are recessive.
Hmm.
It takes some time and it takes some effort to get
Yep.
some of these combos. It can take up to get a double recessive, it can take up to 9 years. You know what I mean? To produce that double recessive mutation. So it's like it's an investment for the person that first produced it, so it's like, yeah, it has that tag because they're one of very few species that have mostly recessive traits when it comes to the morph side of things.
Yeah.
Even normals now, hognose snakes, as far as normal goes, are probably the most expensive normals out there.
They're
Like
also the
Yeah,
rarest
you're
form.
looking at 200 to 300 bucks on average, maybe a
yeah,
little lower if you find a good deal.
yeah, like normal hogs are not cheap. Like that's you can pick up a lot of. I picked up South Florida yellow rats for $50 a pop at Daytona. You'll never find a hog nose for that, even if it's not het for nothing. Like a
Yeah.
baby hog is never going to go anywhere close to that. That's
Be
just
concerned if you find it for that price and don't take it home.
exactly like it really says something. Like hog noses are just kind of in their own category of colubrids, man. Like, and then you can forget about it if you get into southern and easterns that are established on rodents.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
you could. You're paying $500-600,
Yep.
for something like that, and those don't have any morphs. Well, no, that's a lie.
They've got some definitely
There is
polygenic
albino.
stuff
Yeah,
going
there's
on in
some
there.
albino, and there's
Oh, I
also
haven't even seen
albino
those.
southerns. There's
Okay.
albino southerns that God, I can't remember his name. He's like
Kevin Fisher.
Kevin Fisher. Yeah, he works with albino southerns, and Lord, I don't even want to know what he would move those for. But
Yeah.
he's kind of the king of the non-Western hognose snakes, in captivity. But again, and that's all because like those are even harder than Westerns,
Mhm.
to get them going, especially on rodents. Like it is very hard to get Southern and Eastern hogs going on non-rodent or on rodent, diets. Like it's so hognoses are just kind of in their own category, man. Like they're awesome though. Like I love hogs. They have been, always will be one of my favorite species of snakes, like bar none. Period. Like they're amazing. But
Look, your rambling caused him to freeze.
I'm sorry. I ramble. I ramble when I get excited about stuff.
Look at he's disappointed.
Is it all my fault?
Yep.
Sorry. Oh.
Yep.
He'll pop back on in a second.
Yep. He dropped out again.
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk about feeders.
Yeah. I'm about to have to go grab my phone charger. My thing's dropping down to 7%.
Enough of this heterodon talk.
Come
I
on,
enjoyed
man.
my hogs when I had
Come
them.
on, man.
I enjoyed them. They were fun.
They are cool. And that's the thing with hogs is you have to like them.
That little
That's
male
the
was a
thing.
trip, man. Because he was
Yeah,
just
yeah. My male was the same way, dude. He was tiny and he was full of piss and vinegar, and he only ate when he wanted to. Like it was you have to like hognose snakes to keep them. Like that's just it. You back? Can you hear us?
Back. Yep.
All right, cool.
So let's touch on feeders for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Because you're doing your own.
My own mice, just mice. I would love to do a few rats as well, but I decided just to focus on the mice because that's the majority of what my needs are. And I know with the rats present, the mice can tend to get a little intimidated, or they just don't breed as well with rats present. So I have this 8x8 shed in my yard that I really wasn't using for anything, so I decided to convert that into mouse breeding. Uh, with actually just 3 like laboratory style cages in my snake room, and man, doesn't matter if you're cleaning those things, full bedding change every day, like you are
Yeah.
not dodging that smell. And
Yeah.
even just with like 3 males and 6 females, it was noxious walking into this room. So external shed much better, but of course being in Michigan, it gets some decently hot days in the summer and some way too cold days in the winter, so I had to climate control that thing. Called insulation throughout the entire thing. I've got an oil filled heater in there that's on a thermostat. I've got an air conditioner on there that's on a thermostat, like just one of those little mobile units that has the hose that goes out a vent in the wall. And then you've got to ventilate it as well. You've got to keep the air moving, and that can actually do a lot for cooling the animals as well. So inside that shed, I have an oscillating fan that's mounted, constantly circulating the air that's within the shed, and hooked up to a thermostat. I also have a Broan like through wall bathroom fan. So anytime it's over like 80 degrees in there, that thing kicks on and just pulls air through. And then on top of that, an additional ventilation fan that's just hooked up to a timer, so it runs for 15 minutes a couple times a day. So I know you can definitely have some success with much less than that. Mice can probably get quite a bit warmer. We give them credit for, but
Yeah.
with the setup, I don't know. I just really like kind of automating the setup and letting it take care of the animals best I can. So that shed stays within 74 to 83 degrees at all times. And they
Yeah.
produce great in there.
Yeah,
Ours
I
get
was
pretty
gonna, I was,
toasty.
yeah, I was gonna say you're downplaying it a little bit with your Michigan winters.
Oh
It's
yeah,
not
no,
like
they would all freeze to
it's
death. There's no
yeah,
way they'd survive
no.
without heat
I
support.
was born in Wisconsin, which is right across the pond, and the day I was born in January, it was 30 below.
Yeah,
So like it's
yeah, and
not
that's
it's
the
nothing
rare
to
side.
play
It's not
around with.
always going to be that cold, but yeah,
No,
I
no, no,
mean
absolutely not. But
they're
like
not going to make it through the winter on their own.
you're looking at singles to zeros,
Yes.
from January to February. Like it's not no, that's not
I can't fathom 30 below.
dude, the day I was born, my grandma literally until the day she died, she complained about having to go to the hospital the day I was born because it was
Wow.
like freeze your lungs cold the day I was born. It was literally 30 below
So
zero.
I
when I
can
was
remember
born.
one 30 below zero day, and it was actually while I was still in zookeeping, and I took care of the snow leopards, and we had to give supplemental heat to the snow leopards on that day. So that's really saying something.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the mouse
Yeah.
setup, I really old style Freedom Breeder rack that a buddy of mine's letting me use to get this thing kicked off. And so it's the FB10 tubs, and I started out with one male, five females per each tub. And for the majority of those tubs, all the females are still cranking. Sometimes some of them just don't produce, so it's good to have a little redundancy there.
Mhm.
But I've got, I don't know, somewhere around 35 breeding tubs set up that way, a couple hundred neos per week. So it's doing pretty well this time of year.
Yeah.
What are
And yeah,
you doing for diet?
I use Kalmbach, the 23% protein
Okay.
diet. So it's a rodent block, and then I supplement with sunflower seeds. I just basically every week when I clean, I'm putting in some sort of treat, whether it's the sunflower seeds
Mhm.
or Cheerios or dried mealworms or black soldier
Mhm.
fly larvae. I
Yeah,
think black
they
soldier
go
fly
crazy
larvae,
on some of that.
yeah,
Yeah, man.
it's a good fat boost as well. So for those breeding moms,
Mhm.
the fat really seems to help.
High in calcium too.
Yep.
Yeah, we're a big Cheerio component for
Yeah.
our group, man. They love those Cheerios. But
Yep.
man, Justin, that's the level we need to get on, man, because these this rodent bill is kind of killing me. We got to get our colony up to a little bit more production, man. Because
Trying.
yeah, man.
That's the one thing that I look forward to with cool down each year is like I can take some pressure off having to feed stuff, and we can
Yep.
actually fill the freezer.
Stockpile
And
your rodents. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I
And
did not
currently
do
with
enough of last year. I did not plan well last year, and I was like, I got 80 pinkies that'll last me. I blew through that in like not
oh
even a
no,
month.
yeah, especially
2
when you get a bunch
weeks.
of hatchlings.
That's
And
2 weeks when you have
yeah,
What was I
hatchlings.
thinking? How did I possibly think this was enough?
yeah. So I'm glad to be producing the mice. I definitely produce more than what I need at this point. So I've got a local buddy that's actually got a whole huge customer base. He does rodents and snakes full time. So I wholesale any of my surplus to him that's not going in my own freezer, and it works out.
Yeah.
And your
That's
ratios,
awesome,
you
man.
said it's 1 male to 5 females?
One male to five. Yep. In an FB10 tub. Yeah. It gets, if all five of those females are producing well, it gets pretty crowded. I think where some of those smaller babies are getting a little smothered. So 1 to 3 would probably be more ideal if it's especially it seems like the spring and the fall, everyone is doing a lot better with production. Then summer
Yeah.
and winter it backs off a little bit. Um, yeah, and I don't really have a super set tracking system for when I'm retiring groups or starting new ones.
Hmm.
I'd say I almost just more go by the look of the group. You can see when they start to get, it's usually going to be about the 6 month mark
Hmm.
when
Right.
that production is going to drop. So pull the males first, let those females get those last litters out, and then those last litters are great ones to hold back and start raising up more colonies from. But
Yeah.
yeah, every so often, if it seems like I got a couple cages retiring, I just hold back some weaned babies and start some new colonies, raise them up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about that when we were cleaning mice last weekend, because we clean on Sundays, and I was telling him, I was like, I usually, so I'd have like a memo. I have my notepad app on here, and I would
Yeah,
keep track. I'd have like, because we have a 2 stacks of 4 on smaller like cat litter pan size tubs,
yeah,
and then we have another rack with concrete mixing tubs in it, and I would keep track. At one point, and I really fell off the wagon of doing it because I
yeah.
put a new
I
group
thought
in.
about doing something like that, and a
I
lot.
need to
So
do a spreadsheet or something where I can tell when I actually like A, do something that's a little more organized, and B, actually stay on top of it.
right,
Because there's some groups in there I'm like, these are probably due to be done. But then I'm like, because sometimes I do move groups around because I'll have one group that just doesn't do well, and we end up having a bloodbath. And so then I end up moving something else into those tubs, or moving a group that was below them into that slot, and then starting a new one at the bottom. And then I forget to keep track of that one that I moved up there. And so I'm like, I
yeah.
don't remember how old these are. Just, I got to
Yeah,
get
I
some
do a
sort
lot
of
of the
system in place.
rotating and moving of the tubs too, so I feel
Yeah.
like any sort of spreadsheet, it would just be a nightmare after a while, but
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why, just kind of going off the look, like if something looks pretty old, like go ahead and stick that in the
sure.
jar per
Or if you
se.
notice, most are smaller than you're used to.
Yeah.
They're probably starting to drop off, and
Right.
Well, I think you can also sort of tell because it seems like, I don't know, I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like their coat gets thinner.
yeah, a little bit of
Yeah.
alopecia. That hair starts to thin out.
Like
Yeah.
it doesn't look as like they're keeping up with it as much as they were, and they
Right.
just look a little rougher. And that's kind of how and same thing with production when I'm noticing litters are like 3 or 4 pinkies at a time. It's like, okay, so it might be time.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we've been having problems with stuff with like bad growths on them and stuff. Like when they get to a certain age, and it's like, man, if we would have called this a couple weeks earlier, like this could have been a good feeder. But
Oh, right.
now it's got this
You're not
nasty.
quite sure what it is,
Yeah,
and
I'm
you don't
weird
know what
about
it looks
feeding
Yeah,
like.
those.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
No,
wouldn't
I
want to
agree.
feed
It's
something
not
with a
worth it.
nasty lump on it. Like it's one
Yep.
thing if it's one thing if it got kind of attacked by the other. It's got kind of that, we call it the scaly backs. Like the ones
Mhm.
that didn't take well
Scabies.
to the group. And we'll call those like that's an easy one to feed off. But if something has this weird growth lump on it, like I don't really want to feed that to one
I
of
mean,
my
I've
animals.
had the Southern Pine one that had last weekend that had like a smaller lump. Not like that. We had one that had like it
That
was
was
like an
that
entire
was
other mouth
nasty,
attached to
dude.
it.
Like it was
Sure, and the snakes can
nasty.
handle that stuff better than we're gonna give them credit for, but
Yeah,
we've got
yeah,
plenty
I
of healthy
feel weird
available
about it.
feeders, so why risk it? Yeah.
It gets tossed in the woods for something to eat.
Yep.
Keeping the local raccoons and stuff well fed, that's for sure.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I do. Like stuff that sits in a cage, if something doesn't get eaten, like dude, I'll start outside and
Mhm.
something eats it. Like even my frog leg bones. So like I go through my frog legs and I'll chop off all the meat of one for my water snakes, and I just take the bones and throw them outside, and like
Yep.
they
Yeah,
get
I
taken
live
up.
surrounded by woods, and
Yeah,
yeah, it's a nice garbage disposal to
yeah.
feed the ecosystem.
Yeah, no waste, man. Like I don't like
Mhm.
throwing anything like that away. Like, yeah, is it kind of gross? Yes, but like I don't want to throw it in my garbage because
It's gonna
it
stink.
was, yeah, it's gonna stink, number one, but number two, it's like, that's something that could be eaten by something else. No, I don't want to feed to my snakes, but a raccoon will chomp down on what's left of those, or like one of the local cats, which I'm not an advocate of house cats being outside, but we have a group of cats that hang around my yard, and I know those things will be more than happy to eat my frog leg leftovers. So
Yep.
that's
Have you had, so we have like on the bigger tubs where we have a decent sized group in there, I think it's usually 2 or 3 males to, I don't know, at least 10 females. Have you done anything with bigger groups like that? And if so, have you noticed any issues in terms of production dropping off? Because I'm trying to find that sweet spot. So I'm trying to have more than sort of what I have in the smaller tubs, which is typically 1 to 4 females or so, 1 male to 4
Hmm.
females. And then I have those mixer tubs that are a little bigger. And some of those groups are still a little young, like they haven't really sort of hit their peak yet in terms of like regular litters and stuff. But I'm wondering if having a bigger group like that maybe ends up curbing production a little bit. I don't.
I think it would depend on a lot of factors. Like in some ways, so I haven't done much with multiple males just because the FB10s is the max size that I have, and fitting
Yeah.
a much larger group isn't going to go well. But just from what I know about their production, having multiple males can actually be an aid in production because sometimes the sperm count just isn't super great from a
Right,
single
and
male.
that's the reason I
Um,
wanted to have multiple males in there, because it's
yep,
like you just
yeah,
have
it's a
one
little
male in there, like
backup plan. Yeah,
he's gonna freaking wear himself out. Like,
right.
he's not gonna get the job done with more than, maybe a couple females at a time.
Yeah,
So that was my
and
thinking with having at least 2 in there. I ideally I think 3 is probably better, just because I notice if you have 2, one ends up becoming subordinate to the other one. And if
yes,
you
yep,
have a third one in there, that kind of cancels that out a little bit. I will still find that there will be one male out of the 3 typically that kind of gets to be the bottom of the totem pole.
yeah.
Um,
So
but
I've
having that
also
other
heard
male in
that
there
as far as having multiple males goes, there are some situations where if a male mouse can smell the urine of another mouse, especially more of a dominant one, like it, so you're essentially just having additional males in there eating up food and taking space
okay.
without contributing to the breeding. So yeah, it's really tough to say in the setups we have whether it's going to be beneficial or not.
Well, we'll have to experiment with that, because we
Yeah.
do have, we had a group that just, there was, it went awry, and we lost a lot of them
Okay.
in that group. Like, they ended up being just freaking cannibal fest. Um,
Were they raised together? Like
Yeah,
were
yeah, all
those
the
young
groups
mice?
that I put
Okay.
together,
Yeah, and
I
usually
try to raise them together as best
that
as I
helps.
can, and then when they get to a certain age, I'll kinda mix them up a little bit just to sort of diversify, so they're not all just siblings together
Oh,
constantly,
I see.
direct
Yeah.
siblings.
Right.
So
Like as soon
we
as
grow
they're
them
weaned,
out.
put them all together.
Yep, and then once
Yeah.
they get to sort of that adult size, then I'll put them in groups, because that kinda gives me a better idea of how many
Okay.
males and females I have, because 'cause I've made the
Right.
mistake of culling a bunch of males and then realizing, "Oh, I only had 1 now in that group, and I've got all these
Yeah.
females," and it's like, I can't split them up. I can't put ratios together, like, I screwed myself. Um, but what we have one of those mixer tubs is now empty, so maybe with this next batch, Jake, we might try 1 male and then do, like, 6 or 7 females instead
Mhm.
of, 2 males to 10 or whatever.
Right.
I don't know. I'm constantly trying to
Yeah.
find the sweet
I mean,
spot, like,
I've heard of people having success with the 2 to 10 as well. So it's so many factors even beyond what we're talking about that could be contributing to success of it. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I
maybe
think
having a variety of setups and it all evens out and you get pretty decent production across the
mhm.
board. So
yeah, and just hearing your numbers of what the amount of tubs that you keep with the numbers that you keep, definitely hearing that, I think we definitely need to up our breeding. Yeah, we need to make more racks for one so we can hold more because space is limited. But yeah, I think we need to up some numbers for sure, in order to feed, both of ours. Because between Justin and I, man, we have nearly 200 snakes, you
yeah.
know.
Yeah,
So
I've got
uh,
about 40 plus hatchlings that come through
yeah,
and yeah, hatchlings are just eating every single pinky you can produce.
Yep.
So
yeah. Yeah, no, we're breeding, and I try and get what I can from us. Like I basically all I've gotten is pinkies, but dude, at this point, I'm being eaten out of house and home with these
Mhm.
Colubrids, man. I spent $900 on my last rodent order, you know, getting stuff, and that was 2-3 months ago, and I'm about out of jumbo adult mice now, and I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
god, like I can't do this again. Like I don't.
Now, do you do pretty much just jumbo mice for your, or do you do any rats?
So
Not for
for
breeding, but just for
my
feeding them?
So for my colubrids, so I did a lot, especially since I'm buying a lot of rodents now. I try to do a little bit of math and talking to, you know, somebody I respect the most as far as Pituophis goes, because my Pituophis eat more than anybody
Oh,
else.
yeah.
You know, I have a lot of southeastern rat snakes, so I pretty much give them one prey item that's sufficient and then move on from there. But my pits, they need something a little bit more. And I did some math and looking at, and it turns out 2 extra large mice are actually cheaper than 1 medium rat.
For sure,
Um,
but what do you think of the fat content difference with
th-
those
and
old breeder
that's
mice that just have all this fat stores versus like
Hmm.
a young lean rat?
Yep.
Well, see, then that's what I mean is like so, and that's why also I went with that because in my opinion, it seems like these retired breeder mice they would still have less fat than a single medium rat.
A
You know
medium,
what I
yeah.
mean? Yeah, a medium. Yeah, no, anything smaller than a medium, that's a different story. But like with your
Yeah.
big pits, you know, like in my opinion, 2 smaller mice is going to be or 2 jumbo mice is going to be a healthier meal than 1 medium rat.
Okay.
You know,
Yep.
at least in my opinion, because rats hold a lot more fat, you know, and
Right.
Pituophis in general are better off eating multiple smaller items because they are nest raiders. You know, you know, the gopher snakes, they get called gopher snakes because they invade gopher burrows and they eat up all the babies in a burrow. You know, they're nest raiders, you know, naturally, granted for rodents, you know. So I've always thought that the jumbo mice was a better route to go, you know, feeding 2 versus 1 single medium rat, you know. So that's why I've kind of gone the route I have in feeding. So all my adult pets get fed to jumbo mice, you know, every week to 10 days. And other than one, because all she wants to eat is freaking rats. So she gets medium rats because she won't eat mice, you know, but she gets 1 medium rat. Um, but with that, I've also seen a great deal of growth. Like when I switched
Mm.
everything over to two jumbo mice versus 1 medium rat, the growth rate was exponential. You know, like
Oh, interesting.
a lot of them exploded doing that, which kind of I wasn't expecting that. I was kind of expecting them to kind of maintain, but the ones that I switched over, like they blew up in size and like they're maintaining very, very well. So I really prefer to go with the 2 extra large mice. Now, granted, you know, I have a 6 foot yellow rat. He eats 1 jumbo mice, you know,
Rico.
about every 7 to 10 days. Yeah, Rico. And that sustains him perfectly, you know, like he's great. But it's the Pituophis that eat a lot more because those higher metabolisms that like
Yeah.
I prefer, you know, I talking to Chris, you know, he said it's better to do smaller meals more often versus your bigger meals less often, you know.
Sure.
So with that said, you know, rats in general have a higher fat content. So I've changed up even with my carpets, you know, I try not to feed rats unless I'm trying to fatten up, you know. So once they get past the point of eating a extra large mouse, you know, whereas, you know, with carpets, I don't like feeding multiples as much. You know, Colubrids, different story. I put a couple down and like they rock and roll with that. Carpets naturally like to eat those bigger meals left less often. So pretty much all my adult carpets, unless I'm fattening up, they actually get quail now.
Oh, yeah.
Because quail are also, you know, a bit cheaper than rats. Rats are stupid expensive for some reason. So I've tried to cut out rats pretty much altogether until I'm coming up on breeding season. I want to fatten up some of my female carpets. But yeah, I tried to cut out rats for pretty much all aspects. I think mice in general are healthier, you know. And yeah, I have seen a difference with my Pituophis feeding to, you know, jumbo mice versus the medium rats because it puts less of a bulge in them, you know, for one. And I know Colubrids really they don't, you know, the whole bulge thing is not that big of a deal with them, you know,
Sure.
something to sustain.
So I really try and keep, meals appropriately sized, and I'll do multiple items before I give them something big. And that also goes for one of my gray rats. She was throwing up medium mice, but she was eating fuzzies fine.
Yeah.
I skip sizes because I think it's kind of unnecessary. Your smaller mice are pretty close to fuzzy mice, but your big small mice are closer to mediums. So I kind of cut
Yep.
out smalls. I go from fuzzy to mediums. So I'll double up on fuzzies for a couple weeks, to a couple months before I upgrade to a medium mouse, because that's just what works for me. But I've noticed, I tried to jump a gray rat from a fuzzy to a medium, and she was big enough, but she started throwing up the mediums because it was a little too big, but she would eat two fuzzies. So I upped her to two fuzzies for a couple months, and then started feeding her mediums after that. And then she was good. She's slamming mediums now, no problem. So that's just, I think multiple small items is a lot better than one big one when it comes to colubrids. Carpets are a completely different story. You can give them a really big meal and they'll probably be okay. Colubrids, really not the case. And so that's kind of the route I go. I really tried to cut out rats. I have cut out rats completely for my colubrids and the stuff that will eat nothing but rats. And that is one Florida pine that has been a thorn in my side, but she eats, so I accept it. She eats a medium rat.
Yep. Just got to feed them what they want to eat
Yeah,
sometimes.
so, and I'm okay with that. And I would rather feed one medium rat versus two small rats. Again, because of fat content, and that's, maybe I'm just full of it, but like just feeling rats in general comparatively to mice, like you feel a small rat, it's very soft. It's very
Mhm.
mushy to me versus a jumbo mouse. It's much more, it feels much more lean. It's not as mushy, from what I can feel. And to me, that goes into fat content. So that's my opinion, and from what I have been doing with my animals, it seems to have done very, very well, especially for the breeder females that are coming up. um, and again, it's cheaper. Two
Yeah.
extra large mice are cheaper than one medium rat, and
Yeah, that is for sure.
if it's healthier and cheaper, you can sign me right up. So, that's just work for me. I'm not saying that's what's right, because one of the most successful Pituophis breeders out there feeds large rats to her big Pituophis once a week, and
Hmm.
I that seems like a lot to me, but that's, to each their own. So there's a lot of ways you can do it, but Pituophis being the nest raiders that they are naturally, I think multiple small prey items are a much healthier and more natural route to go. And talking about being natural is kind of funny, since we keep snakes in boxes.
Sure.
But when you keep snakes in boxes, we have to do what we can to try and keep it as natural as possible. And I think that's a good way to do it, is with your prey that you feed. So
Yep. And the proof's in the longevity, I think.
yeah, no,
So
absolutely. And that
but
makes
we're also really figuring it out, because I feel like a couple of years ago, it was much more common for everybody to feed single larger items. But I
yeah,
feel like across the board, all species, there's much more of a conversation these days about feeding multiple smaller items more frequently.
yeah,
I think that's probably a lot easier on the liver as well, not having to have as a hunk of protein to
Hmm.
attack at once.
yeah.
So
And it's also like I always think of the aspect of, like, none of these things want to be digesting basically constantly. And when you
mhm.
have the metabolism of a Pituophis, like if you give them, a bigger item once a week, they're basically be in a constant mode of digestion.
Right.
Those smaller items a little bit more frequently, they're going to digest them a little faster, and you can give them a couple days of getting that poop out of their system and then feed them again. Versus, something bigger, it's going to take longer to digest, and by the time they digest it, you're going to be feeding them again. So, I don't think that's comfortable for the snakes. I like to have my snakes cleaned out before I feed them again. So, but yeah.
You'd be a great chondro breeder.
No, I would not.
All right. Well, we're at the 2:15 mark. Where can people get a hold of you if they have any questions about rhinos, Russians, or any of the other cool stuff you're working with?
Yeah, as far as social media, I'm just on Instagram, not on Facebook. So I'm at Handmade Herps, all lowercase. It's a good spot to see just photos of everything else I've got going on in the collection. DM me, reach out to me there, even if you're just curious about the species. I have a Morph Market account as well. Not a ton of stuff actually makes it to Morph Market. I feel like more commonly people are reaching out on Instagram and it goes there. But you can occasionally see stuff posted there, and my contact info is there on my Morph Market page, Handmade Herps, as well. So if you're not on Instagram, feel free to reach out to me that way. Just please don't take my phone number and sign me up for spam because
Oh,
elections and we're all
You there?
oh.
Yep, I'm here.
No
Yeah,
spam. No spam calls.
Correct.
please
That's the one rule.
don't.
Seems like a pretty solid one.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. No, Sid, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. Justin
Thanks for
messaged
having me.
Yeah, Justin messaged me. He said you're coming on. And I was like, ooh, yeah, I'm excited for this one.
Rhinos.
Good. Yeah, no, and you talking to you and Justin, man, I've always been kind of partial. I don't keep either one. I'm on the list to get some Barons here soon.
He's a Barons guy.
Yeah, but man, I'm not gonna lie. Like, it's mostly at this point, it's mostly I just like messing with you. But man, your rhinos are freaking cool, man. Like, oh, dude, they're so cool. But at the same token, like, I feel like Justin and I bounce off each other very well of keeping similar stuff, but yet different.
Right.
So I'm kind of gonna go more the Barons route because they're just freaking awesome. I'm gonna let Justin handle the rhinos, but yeah, no, man. Between you and Justin and everybody else loving rhinos, you've really got me kind of low key wanting some. But yeah, they're freaking
I
awesome,
think they're
man.
worth it. Yep.
Yeah, I love every time I go into Justin's room. The first thing I look at is those BioGs with those rhinos in it, man, because they're always out. They're always awesome, and handling them is just amazing. They're
Yep.
such awesome animals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this episode was brought to you by BlackBoxCages.com. Check them out. Keep an eye out for the video on building an EXT4 for the Ackies. Once again, not sure exactly how I'm going to go about releasing them. I kind of don't want to put them out there, like do the assembly one and then a week later put out the lighting one. So those two will probably go up, and then the actual like setting up of the cage itself will be its own thing sort of after the fact. So because there's going to be a lot of editing and stuff involved too. And if you guys know me, you know that I absolutely hate editing videos. So
Well, if you need any help recording like that, hit me up. I'll come out.
I'm probably going to have you help me get that other cage out and put this one in and have you take the other one back.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That I knew was coming. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
I need that cage anyways because yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I could use some space for. So.
Yeah. So keep an eye out for that. And then check out Steve Snakeshore and his Venom Hot Sauce, stevesnakeshore.com. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. And he posts videos and pictures of all the stuff he's doing and things he's pulling out of people's yards to relocate and all that good stuff. It's pretty cool. So PJ, once again, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Back. Yeah. We'll be back for Snakes and Stogies Monday. I believe Phil is still intact after the storm. Pretty sure he didn't get his place didn't get leveled.
Yeah, I think South Florida was pretty okay. There's a lot of western Florida that got it pretty bad, but South Florida was pretty good. So
Corn Stars, we got some stuff we're working on lining up. Chondrocast. There's an episode in the works there.
Oh.
So Mike Cuppins can stop sending me little tombstone pictures with the Chondrocast logo on it, and that'd be could finally get him to shut up.
Yeah.
No, it'll be good.
Yeah.
So be on the lookout for those.
Yeah.
Everyone have a good evening.
Yeah. Thanks so much, PJ. We really appreciate it, man.
Yep. Thank you. Have a good one, guys.
You too.